Divorce court wasn't where I wanted to spend my Friday morning, but with an ex-wife like Monica, I had no choice. The whole process had been a nightmare from the start. Delays, nonsense filings, outright tantrums, all designed to waste my time. If Monica had put half as much effort into our marriage as she did into making my life hell, we wouldn't have ended up here. But the moment she walked into the hearing, pregnant, I nearly laughed. Not because I thought the kid was mine. I knew it wasn't. But because I could see the scheme forming in her head, like a cheap soap opera plot playing out in real time. Monica was banking on one thing, that the judge would see her as a poor, vulnerable, abandoned pregnant woman and force me to pay up. Forget the prenup, forget logic. Just play the sympathy card and walk out with a hefty payout. I could already hear the speech she had planned in her head. Your Honor, I have a baby on the way, and I've been left with nothing. How am I supposed to survive? All while shooting me pitiful glances, waiting for me to squirm under the pressure. Too bad for her, I don't squirm. I don't lose. What Monica didn't realize was that I had already figured her out months ago. The thing about Monica wasn't just that she was bad at marriage, she was bad at lying. She was predictable, sloppy, and worst of all, overconfident. She thought she had this in the bag. She thought I'd panic, get flustered, maybe even offer a settlement just to avoid looking like the bad guy. She had no idea that the one question the judge was about to ask her would make her entire scheme crumble. Monica walked into the courtroom with an air of smugness, her hand resting on her belly like a prop, her other hand brushing her hair behind her ear as if she wasn't about to commit blatant fraud in a courtroom. She even sighed dramatically when she took her seat, as if this entire ordeal was exhausting her fragile, pregnant self. I didn't react. I didn't need to. Unlike Monica, I wasn't walking in blind. I was ready. And so was my lawyer, Marcus. Marcus was the kind of guy who smiled in court, but would absolutely gut you with the law. I didn't like lawyers much, but after watching him dismantle Monica's antics over the last few months, I was glad he was on my side. Monica, on the other hand, had gone through 3 different lawyers since this divorce started. The one she had today was a newbie, fresh out of law school, probably desperate to win his first big case. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. Because here's the thing, Monica had tried this before. Not the pregnancy stunt, but the manipulation. The fake distress. The, I'm just a struggling woman, Your Honor, please take pity on me act. And unfortunately, some people bought it, including my own mother. A week before the hearing, my mom had called me, her voice weary. Just settle, she said. You don't want this dragging on forever. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Mom, she's not getting a cent. That's why we had a prenup. She's pregnant, she pushed. Do you really want that on your conscience? I almost lost it. This isn't my kid, Mom. She hesitated. Are you sure? Was I sure? Mom, she cheated on me. Repeatedly. I caught her. Besides, you know what the worst part is? If I actually thought this was my kid, she wouldn't even need to pull this stunt. I'd be there. I'd take care of them. That's the difference between us. She schemes. I take responsibility. Mom went quiet for a moment, then sighed. I just don't want to see this get uglier. It was already ugly, but I promised her I'd handle it. Which brings us back to today. The judge walked in, and the hearing began. Monica's lawyer launched into his sob story immediately. Your Honor, my client has been left in an impossible situation. She is pregnant, unemployed, and struggling due to the emotional and financial strain caused by this drawn-out divorce. Monica sniffled on cue, wiping an invisible tear from the corner of her eye. I didn't even blink. Marcus, my lawyer, waited patiently, letting the theatrics play out before finally standing. Your Honor, while we certainly sympathize with Miss Carter's situation, we must clarify a few things before proceeding. First and foremost, he turned to Monica's lawyer. Who is the father of this child? Just like that, Monica visibly stiffened. I knew that question was coming. Monica didn't. She assumed the court wouldn't question her pregnancy, that she could waltz in, look vulnerable, and walk out with a fat check. But legally, her pregnancy was only relevant if I was the father. Her lawyer froze, then weakly mumbled, My client believes it is the petitioner's. I almost laughed. Believes? Marcus didn't even flinch. She believes? So there's no proof. Monica shifted uncomfortably. The judge's eyes narrowed. Miss Carter, have you had a paternity test done? Her mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. She was trapped. I just assumed. You assumed? The judge repeated, unimpressed. Miss Carter, is there any evidence to suggest the petitioner is the father? Her lawyer looked like he wanted to die. Monica looked pale. I leaned back in my chair, enjoying the show. At this point, Marcus was ready to finish her off. Your Honor, we have strong reason to believe this child is not my client's. He pulled out photos taken 2 months after Monica and I separated. Pictures of her on vacation, holding hands with another man. Kissing. Clear proof she had moved on. Then, the final nail in the coffin, medical documents. Marcus slid the papers across the table. Additionally, we have subpoenaed Miss Carter's recent medical records, which show that her first confirmed pregnancy test was months after she and my client had last been together. Monica's face crumpled. Her lawyer looked at her like she had just thrown him into the ocean with an anchor tied to his feet. The judge let out a long sigh and shook his head. Miss Carter, this court does not take kindly to deception. Given the evidence, there is no basis for financial support. The prenup stands. You will not be receiving alimony or additional compensation. Boom. Monica gasped, as if she had been physically struck. But, Your Honor, the judge held up a hand. This hearing is over. Done. Monica sat there, frozen. The judge's words were still hanging in the air, but I could see it happening in real time, her brain scrambling for a way out. This wasn't how today was supposed to go for her. In her version of events, she was supposed to cry, look pitiful, and leave with a fat monthly check. Instead, she had been publicly exposed. Her lawyer wasn't even looking at her anymore. He was staring at the floor, probably reevaluating every decision that led him to take this case. And Monica? She was gripping the edge of the table like she could somehow hold onto the last shreds of her scheme. The tantrum was coming. I just sat back and waited. Monica sat frozen, her scheme crumbling around her. The courtroom was silent except for the judge's firm declaration. This hearing is over. She didn't move. Her lawyer sat stiff beside her, likely regretting ever taking this case. I could see it happening in real time, Monica scrambling for a way to salvage the situation. She had walked in, belly out, expecting to leave with a check. Instead, she had been exposed, humiliated, and legally shut down. But Monica wasn't the type to go down gracefully. The tantrum was coming. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white, and then it started. Your Honor, this isn't fair. I'm about to have a baby, and he just gets to walk away? She burst out, her voice rising in pitch. The judge exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. He was done. Miss Carter, he said, his tone clipped. This court does not make financial judgments based on emotional appeals. Your pregnancy has no legal bearing on this divorce unless paternity is established, which, based on the evidence provided, it has not been. She turned her furious gaze toward me, desperate for one last shot. You're really going to do this to me? To your own child? I smiled. A slow, amused, merciless smile. You really want to do this, Monica? I leaned forward, my voice calm. Even. You want to go on record accusing me of being the father? Because we can get a court-ordered paternity test right now. Her face twitched. She had nothing. She knew it. And now, so did everyone else in the room. The judge didn't even bother responding this time. He simply turned to the court clerk. Adjourned. It was over. I stood, buttoning my suit jacket, while Marcus, my lawyer, gave me a small nod of approval. Monica, meanwhile, sat there, still in shock, still trying to process the fact that her entire plan had just exploded in her face. I walked out of the courtroom, feeling lighter than I had in months. But Monica wasn't done yet. She came storming out of the courtroom minutes later, heels clacking against the marble floor, face red with rage, hands shaking. I heard her before I saw her. You're a monster, she hissed as she caught up to me. You let me sit there humiliated. I turned slowly, looking her up and down. I'm sorry, Monica. Was it the part where you tried to scam the court that humiliated you, or the part where you realized I was 3 steps ahead? Her jaw clenched. You set me up. I chuckled, shaking my head. No, sweetheart. You set yourself up. I just let you walk into it. She looked like she wanted to throw something at me. But then, she tried one last card. She turned to my mother, Susan, who had been standing nearby, watching everything unfold with tired eyes. Are you seriously okay with this? Monica's voice cracked. With what he did to me. Mom crossed her arms, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she spoke. I'm not okay with what you did to him. Her voice was firm. You had us all fooled once. Never again. Monica's lip quivered. For a second, I thought she might actually cry. Then, the real explosion. I hope you rot, she shrieked, stepping forward like she wanted to claw at me. I hope you lose everything. Before she could do anything else, a stern voice cut through the tension. Miss Carter. A court officer stepped into the hallway, another standing just behind him. Monica froze. Come with us, please. Her head snapped around. What? What? The first officer didn't blink. The judge has recommended an inquiry into potential perjury and fraud. You'll need to answer some questions. Her eyes went wide. Wait. No, that's not. But they were already leading her back into the courtroom. I let out a slow breath. Beside me, Marcus patted my shoulder. Well, that was satisfying. I smirked. Yeah, it was. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. Monica was no longer my problem. Over the next few months, I heard bits and pieces of what happened. Apparently, the judge wasn't just pissed. He was making an example out of her. Faking financial distress? Bad. Trying to manipulate the court? Worse. Lying under oath? That was perjury. Her fraudulent claims meant she was now under investigation. The court didn't just dismiss her plea for alimony. They flagged her case for potential financial fraud. It got worse from there. She was hit with fines for wasting the court's time. Her lawyer, Jason, dropped her immediately. She tried to file for government aid, denied. Turns out they also require proof of paternity. And the cherry on top? Her new boyfriend, Ryan, dumped her. Apparently, after Marcus pulled out those vacation photos in court, Ryan started doing the math. He realized he wasn't the only one Monica had been with. Suddenly, he wasn't so sure he was the father, either. I can only imagine how that conversation went. A few months after the trial, I got a text from an unknown number. Monica, I hope you're happy. I stared at it for a second, then typed back. Me, I am. Thanks for asking. Then, I blocked the number. For the first time in a long time, I was free. It had been months since the courtroom showdown, and life was finally peaceful. No more legal battles. No more ridiculous schemes. No more Monica. Or so I thought. Because despite losing spectacularly in court, Monica wasn't the type to just disappear. No, she was the type to burn every bridge and then stand in the ashes, crying about how unfair the world was. And sure enough, even after being exposed, humiliated, and hit with legal consequences, she wasn't done trying to drag me down with her. I should have expected it. The first sign of trouble came when I got a call from my bank. Mr. Carter, we need to verify some unusual activity on your account. I frowned, sitting up in my chair. What kind of activity? A series of attempted withdrawals and account changes. Several requests for statements. One attempt to add an authorized user, and, the banker hesitated, a flagged attempt to access your online banking from an unfamiliar device. I exhaled slowly. Let me guess. All from Monica Carter. A pause. She did provide identification under that name. Yes. I chuckled humorlessly. Of course, she had. Lock it down. Freeze any changes. And send me a list of every attempt she made. I hung up, shaking my head. The audacity. Monica had already lost everything in court. But now, she was trying to find a new way to squeeze money out of me. This time, by accessing my accounts. Unfortunately for her, I was already ahead of her. The next week, I got another call. This time from Marcus, my lawyer. You're not going to believe this, he said, sounding almost amused. Try me, I replied. Monica's trying to appeal the ruling. Claims she was coerced into signing the prenup and that new evidence proves you were financially abusive during the marriage. I actually laughed. Financially abusive? She spent more on handbags than I did on my mortgage. I know, but she's desperate. She found a new lawyer, some bottom feeder willing to take the case on contingency. They won't win, I said confidently. Of course not. The judge won't even entertain it. Not after she tried to manipulate the court last time. But it's a nuisance. That's all Monica had left. She had no case, no credibility, no sympathy. But she could still be a nuisance. And she was about to make that my problem. Over the next few weeks, Monica tried everything she could think of. She filed a complaint with my workplace, claiming I had harassed her. It was dismissed immediately. Everyone knew the divorce details, and no one bought her story. She started rumors that I had cheated on her during our marriage, hoping to turn mutual friends against me. It didn't work. Most people had already cut ties with her after the trial. She even tried to have me investigated for tax fraud, making an anonymous report to the IRS. That one almost made me respect her effort, except that I had been meticulous with my finances for years. They took one look at my records and laughed her out of the system. It was exhausting, but I refused to let her win. Then, she made her biggest mistake yet. One evening, I was having dinner with my mother when my phone buzzed with a notification. A new email. From Monica. I opened it, expecting some long-winded rant, but what I saw instead made my blood run cold. Attached was a document, a forged loan agreement with my name on it, claiming that I had promised Monica a six-figure sum to help support her transition after the divorce. The message was simple. Pay me, or I take this to court. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, I forwarded the email to Marcus. The next morning, we were in his office, reviewing the forged document. She's actually lost her mind, I muttered, shaking my head. Marcus smirked. She's desperate. And sloppy. This is textbook fraud. What are our options? We could ignore it, but she might still try to file a case. Or we could file a counterclaim for attempted extortion and document forgery. I didn't even hesitate. File it. Monica wanted war. She was about to get one. By the time Monica realized what was happening, it was too late. She had assumed I'd be too scared of legal trouble to call her bluff. Instead, I turned her scheme into her downfall. When we filed the case, Marcus made sure to include everything. The fraudulent loan document, the email where she tried to blackmail me, a record of all her failed attempts to get money out of me, bank fraud, workplace complaints, IRS reports. We painted the full picture. Monica wasn't a struggling single mother. She was a manipulative fraud who had spent months trying to scam me and the legal system. And this time, the court didn't just dismiss her case. They charged her forgery, extortion, attempted fraud. The same judge who had ruled against her before made it clear she was done. Her case was thrown out so fast it made headlines. And as an extra slap in the face, she was ordered to pay my legal fees. Monica had thought she could outplay me. Instead, she played herself. And now, she was completely, utterly broke. After the court dismissed Monica's latest scheme and hit her with legal fees, I expected that to be the end of it. But Monica never knew when to quit. She had lost the alimony case. She had lost the fraudulent loan scam. She had lost her credibility, her dignity, and now, her finances. And yet, she still believed she could find a way to turn the tables. That was her fatal mistake. The fallout from her fraud case spread fast. With the court ruling against her, Monica's financial situation went from bad to catastrophic. She had already blown through whatever money she had left from the marriage. Now, with additional legal fees and fines, she was drowning. Her attempts to get government assistance were blocked. Turns out, agencies don't take kindly to people who forge financial documents. Her reputation was ruined. The same people who had once believed her sob stories now saw her for what she was, a manipulator, a liar, a con artist. Even the few remaining friends, she had abandoned her. And then there was Ryan, the boyfriend who had stood by her, convinced he was the father of her child. The same boyfriend who had seen me exposed in court as not the father. At first, he stuck around, probably trying to convince himself that Monica was still the victim. But after Marcus exposed those vacation photos in court, showing Monica with multiple men, Ryan started doing the math. A few weeks later, he was gone, too. Monica had lost everything, and she still wasn't done making mistakes. A month after her fraud case was thrown out, I got a call from Marcus. Monica's filed for an emergency appeal, he said, sounding almost amused. An appeal? Based on what? That's the funny part. She's claiming financial hardship as a reason to revisit the divorce settlement. Claims she wasn't in the right mental state when she signed the prenup and that she's now unable to support herself. I nearly laughed. She's actually trying this again? Not just trying, Marcus replied. She's going all in. She's even claiming that your financial success after the divorce is proof that she was left with nothing and deserves a share of your assets. Let me guess. She's still ignoring the part where she was the one who cheated and tried to scam the court? Oh, completely. I sighed. What do we do? Nothing, Marcus said simply. This is just another stunt. She doesn't have a case. No judge is going to overturn a legally binding prenup just because she's broke and bitter. They'll dismiss it before it even gets to trial. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. Monica's appeal was thrown out within a week. Her last shot at getting money from me was gone. And now, she had no more options, which meant there was only one thing left for her to do. She snapped. The first sign of Monica's total breakdown came through social media. She started posting long, unhinged rants about how I had destroyed her life. She called me a narcissist, a liar, a man who weaponized the legal system against a helpless woman. She tried to paint herself as the victim, claiming I had manipulated the courts, bribed the judge, and used my privilege to escape accountability. She even went as far as accusing me of abusing her during our marriage, a blatant, disgusting lie. At first, I ignored it. But then, she took it a step further. She started messaging my family, my coworkers, and even my friends, sending them long, emotional texts about how I had abandoned her and my unborn child. Except by now, no one believed her. People started sending me screenshots of her messages. And they weren't just ignoring her, they were calling her out. One of my former coworkers responded with, "Monica, we all saw what happened in court. You lied. Move on." Another friend messaged her, "You literally tried to forge a loan document to extort him. Maybe take some accountability." And my mom, she sent one message, "Stop contacting me." That was it. That was when Monica finally realized. She had no one left. The last time I saw Monica, it was completely by accident. I had stopped by a coffee shop one morning when I noticed her sitting in the corner, looking completely unrecognizable. She wasn't the woman who had strutted into court, smug and confident, convinced she was about to walk away with half my money. She looked exhausted, hollow, defeated. Her hair was messy, her clothes were worn, and she had dark circles under her eyes. For a second, I almost felt bad for her. Then I remembered everything she had done. She must have sensed me looking at her because she glanced up. For the briefest moment, our eyes met. Her face twisted with pure hate. I just smiled. Not a smug smile. Not an arrogant one. Just a smile that said, "You did this to yourself." She quickly looked away, staring down at her empty coffee cup, and I knew Monica had finally lost. Not just in court. Not just financially. She had lost everything. Her reputation. Her relationships. Her dignity. And worst of all, she had no one left to blame but herself. A few days later, I got a text. Unknown number. "Are you happy now?" I didn't need to ask who it was. I typed back, "Me, yes. Thanks for asking." Then, I blocked the number. Monica was nothing to me now. Just a bad memory. And for the first time since the divorce started, I was truly, finally free. I should have known Monica wouldn't let go without trying one last desperate move. The appeal had failed. The fraud case had cost her everything. Her reputation was ruined. Her finances were in ruins, and she had no one left in her corner. Even Ryan, the boyfriend she was counting on, had walked out when he realized he might not even be the father of her child. And yet, despite all of that, she still thought she had a way to win. She still thought she could drag me down with her. But what she didn't realize was that this time, she had crossed the wrong line. It started with another call from Marcus, my lawyer. "Monica just filed a restraining order against you." I nearly dropped my phone. A restraining order? Based on what? Alleged harassment and emotional abuse. I let out a long, slow breath. So let me get this straight. After everything she's pulled, after trying to steal from me, forge documents, and lie under oath, now she's the one claiming to be the victim? That's exactly what's happening, Marcus confirmed. She's claiming that after the divorce ruling, you've been stalking her, harassing her online, and trying to intimidate her. I almost laughed. I hadn't spoken to Monica in months. The last time I even saw her was by accident at a coffee shop, where she had looked like a shell of her former self. And now, she was trying to flip the script and make it seem like I was the one obsessed with her. It was pathetic. "So what do we do?" I asked. "We fight it, obviously," Marcus replied. "She doesn't have a case, and filing a false restraining order? That's another legal mess she doesn't want to get into. What's her angle here? Same as always, money. If she gets the restraining order granted, she'll use it to leverage another legal battle, claim damages, and try to squeeze more money out of you. She thinks you'll settle just to avoid the hassle. She really hasn't learned, has she? Apparently not." I sighed. "All right, let's end this." The hearing was scheduled for a week later. I walked in feeling nothing. No anger. No frustration. Just exhaustion. I was tired of Monica. Tired of her lies, her schemes, her endless attempts to claw at me with her manipulative tactics. And I knew this was her last shot. If this failed, she had no more plays left. Marcus was waiting for me inside the courtroom, flipping through a folder of documents. "She's here," he said without looking up. I glanced across the room. Monica was sitting at the table, trying to look delicate and fragile, like a woman under distress. She had gone all in on the performance. Her makeup was subtle, designed to make her look pale and tired. Her hair was slightly messy, but in a way that seemed intentional, like she wanted the judge to believe she was so mentally drained from my supposed harassment that she could barely take care of herself. It was laughable. I took my seat, not even looking in her direction. The judge walked in, and the hearing began. Monica's lawyer started with the same tired script she had used in every other legal battle. "Your Honor, my client has endured months of relentless harassment at the hands of Mr. Carter. She fears for her safety and the safety of her unborn child. She is requesting an immediate protective order to ensure her well-being." Monica sniffled, dabbing at an imaginary tear. I didn't react. The judge turned to my lawyer. "Mr. Davis, how does your client respond?" Marcus stood, completely unfazed. "Your Honor, before we even begin, I'd like to present some evidence to the court that directly contradicts Miss Carter's claims." He walked over to the judge's bench and placed a thick stack of papers in front of him. "These are call logs, text messages, and emails proving that my client has had no contact with Miss Carter since the divorce was finalized. In fact, as you'll see, the only person initiating communication has been her." The judge flipped through the documents, his expression hardening. "Additionally," Marcus continued, "we have records of Miss Carter reaching out to mutual acquaintances, spreading false rumors about my client, and even attempting to access his financial accounts under fraudulent pretenses." The judge's eyes snapped to Monica. I didn't need to see her face to know she was panicking. "Furthermore," Marcus added, "we would like to submit witness statements from multiple individuals who were contacted by Miss Carter with false allegations about my client, all in an attempt to manipulate them into siding with her." The courtroom was dead silent. The judge leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. Then, he turned to Monica's lawyer. "Do you have any evidence to support your client's claims?" The lawyer hesitated. He knew what was coming. We have Miss Carter's testimony." "So, no actual proof?" The judge interrupted. The lawyer cleared his throat. "At this time, no, Your Honor." Boom. The judge sighed, shaking his head. "Miss Carter, this court does not take false claims lightly. There is no evidence of harassment or stalking. In fact, the evidence suggests quite the opposite, that you have been attempting to manipulate and defame the petitioner." Monica's hands clenched into fists. I could see her whole body trembling. "Therefore," the judge continued, "this request for a restraining order is denied." That was it. That was the moment Monica finally realized she had lost. She didn't even wait for the courtroom to clear. As soon as the judge left, she turned on me. "You think this is over?" she spat, her voice low and shaking. "You think you've won?" I looked at her, expression blank. "Monica, I won the moment I walked away from you." Her face twisted with rage. "I hope you're happy, you heartless piece of—" "Miss Carter," a court officer interrupted, stepping forward. "You need to leave now." She turned on him, wild-eyed. "You're all against me. This isn't fair." But the officer wasn't interested in her theatrics. "Let's go." She had no choice. As she was escorted out of the courtroom, I watched her go, feeling absolutely nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. Just peace. Because Monica was finally out of my life for good. A week later, I got a text from an unknown number. "Monica, you ruined my life. I hope you rot." I stared at it for a second. Then I typed back, "Me, you did that all on your own." And then, just like before, I blocked the number. Only this time, I knew she would never be able to come back. It had been weeks since Monica's restraining order stunt had failed, and I was convinced I'd seen the last of her. She had no money, no legal options, no friends left to manipulate. But Monica had never been the type to accept defeat gracefully. And, unfortunately for her, she was about to make one final mistake, one that would ensure she could never mess with me again. It happened on a Friday night. I had just gotten home, ready to enjoy a peaceful weekend, when my phone started buzzing nonstop. Missed calls, voicemails, all from an unknown number. I ignored it at first, assuming it was another scam call. Then, a text came through. "Unknown number. Answer the phone, Daniel." I stared at the message, instantly recognizing the tone. "Monica, I sighed, shaking my head. She was blocked on everything, yet somehow, she had found a new number to reach me. For a moment, I debated ignoring her completely. But something told me that whatever this was, it needed to be shut down, for good. So I picked up. "What do you want, Monica?" I asked flatly. Her voice came through the line, shaky, desperate. "Daniel, please. I need your help." I almost laughed. "My help?" I repeated. "Are you serious?" "I have no one else," she said quickly. "Please, just hear me out." I debated hanging up. But against my better judgment, I let her talk. She launched into a long, dramatic sob story about how everything had fallen apart. Her fraud case had blacklisted her from getting any serious job. She was drowning in legal fees. She had no stable income, no support system. She had lost her apartment. She was homeless. And, according to her, she was still pregnant. "I don't know what to do, Daniel," she sniffled. "I have nothing left. Nowhere to go. I'm scared." I didn't say anything. I just let her sit in the silence, waiting for the real reason she had called. And sure enough, here it came. "I need money," she whispered. "Just a little to get me back on my feet." There it was. The final scam. Even after everything, after trying to ruin my life, after humiliating herself in court, after being caught in blatant fraud, Monica still believed I would be dumb enough to give her money. I sighed, rubbing a hand over my face. "You're unbelievable. Daniel, please," she begged. "I swear I've changed. I just need a little help." "Help?" I interrupted. "You don't need help, Monica. You need accountability." She went silent. "You did this to yourself," I continued. "Every single decision that led you here, you made them. You lied. You scammed. You cheated. And when it all came crashing down, you expected me to clean up the mess." "I didn't. You did," I snapped. "And guess what? I don't care anymore." The phone went dead quiet. I could hear her shallow breathing, like she was trying to hold back another fake sob. But I wasn't falling for it. "Daniel," she whispered. "No," I cut her off. "This is the last time you'll ever hear my voice. You lost, Monica, and I'm done." Then, without another word, I hung up. And this time, I didn't just block her number. I reported it. I didn't hear from her again after that. No more unknown calls. No more desperate texts. Nothing. It was like she had finally realized that there was nothing left for her to take from me. And honestly, that was all I ever wanted. To be free. And now, I was. Weeks passed after Monica's last desperate phone call, and for the first time in a long while, my life felt peaceful. There were no more court battles, no more false accusations, no more attempts to drag me back into her chaos. Monica was gone. And yet, I still couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't truly finished. Because Monica wasn't the type to disappear quietly. So when I finally did hear about her again, I wasn't surprised. But what did surprise me was just how far she had fallen. It started with a random text from a former mutual friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in months. "Mark, hey man, I know you don't want to hear this, but have you seen what's happening with Monica?" I stared at the message for a second before replying. "Me, no. And I don't care. Mark, I figured. Just thought you should know she's in jail." I blinked. For a moment, I wondered if I had misread the message. Monica? In jail? That didn't make sense. She was a liar, a scammer, and a manipulator, sure, but she had always managed to dodge real consequences. I was about to ignore the text when another message came through. "Mark, it's bad, man. You might want to look it up yourself." Curiosity got the better of me. I pulled up my phone, typed her name into the search bar, and there it was. A news article, with her mugshot. I stared at it for a long time, processing what I was looking at. Her face was puffy and tired, her hair a tangled mess. The once smug, self-assured woman who had strutted into courtrooms, convinced she could manipulate her way to financial security, was gone. She looked broken. And then, I read the headline. "Local woman arrested for check fraud, identity theft." I almost laughed. Of course, Monica had tried one last scam, and this time, she had finally gotten caught. I clicked on the article, scanning through the details. Apparently, after I cut her off completely, she had started bouncing from one bad decision to another. She had written fake checks to landlords, trying to rent apartments she couldn't afford. She had stolen credit card information from people she had met, using their names to buy expensive items, only to get caught when one of her victims pressed charges. She had even faked employment records to try and apply for a bank loan, But that, too, had fallen apart when the bank verified her paperwork and realized it was a scam. And now, she was behind bars, awaiting trial. No bail, no escape, no more second chances. I didn't know how to feel. For so long, Monica had been a constant storm in my life, an unpredictable force that caused nothing but destruction. I had spent years cleaning up her messes, trying to protect myself from her schemes, always waiting for the next attack. And now, for the first time, she was completely powerless. There would be no more lies, no more manipulations, no more Monica. She had finally run out of moves. And somehow, that realization felt better than any courtroom victory ever had. I sat with that thought for a while before finally responding to Mark's text. Me, thanks for letting me know, but I really don't care anymore. And that was the truth. Monica's downfall was no longer my concern. She had spent years trying to ruin my life, only to destroy her own instead. And as I put my phone down, blocking her name from my thoughts once and for all, I knew. This time, I was truly, finally free. For so long, Monica had been a dark cloud hanging over my life. No matter how many times I cut her off, no matter how many court victories I won, she always found a way to crawl back, like a parasite that refused to die. But this time, it was different. This time, she was truly gone. Sitting in jail, awaiting trial, Monica had no more power over me. No more threats, no more scams, no more desperate attempts to manipulate her way back into my life. And for the first time in years, I felt something I had forgotten was even possible. Peace. In the weeks following Monica's arrest, I expected some lingering part of me to feel something. Regret? Pity? Maybe even the slightest bit of satisfaction? But the truth was, I felt nothing at all. I didn't check for updates on her case. I didn't ask around about her. I didn't wonder what would happen to her. Because Monica had already taken enough space in my life. She had drained me of my energy, my time, my patience. And I refused to give her another second of it. So instead, I did something I hadn't been able to do for years. I moved forward. At first, it was the little things. Waking up without the immediate stress of dealing with another one of Monica's legal battles. Going to work without having to worry about surprise phone calls from my lawyer, my bank, or my family telling me she had done something new. Eating dinner without feeling the need to check my phone, expecting some dramatic new scheme to drop into my lap. For the first time in years, I had control over my own life. And it felt good. One day, I went through my apartment and started getting rid of everything that reminded me of her. Old paperwork from our divorce. Shredded. The few photos I still had of us from before everything fell apart. Deleted. Even the small, insignificant things, like the random sweatshirt she had left behind in my closet, gone. I didn't want any trace of her in my space anymore. Because Monica didn't exist in my life anymore. And the more I cleared out, the lighter I felt. Like I was exorcising a demon. Like I was finally free. Then, something happened that really put things into perspective. I was at a coffee shop, sitting by the window, enjoying my drink, when I overheard a conversation at the next table. A couple, arguing in hushed voices. I wasn't trying to listen, but the words carried anyway. "Why are you always accusing me of things?" the woman hissed. "You act like I'm some villain, just because you don't trust me." The man sighed. "Because every time I have trusted you, you've given me a reason not to." I stared down at my coffee, the words hitting me harder than I expected. Because that had been my entire marriage. Monica had always played the victim, always turned everything back on me, always made herself the poor, misunderstood woman who just needed me to believe her. Even when she lied, even when she cheated, even when she manipulated me. And back then, I had fallen for it. I had spent so much time doubting myself because Monica was so good at making me feel like the bad guy. It wasn't until I heard it happening to someone else that I realized just how much of my life she had stolen from me. I had been a prisoner to her games, a prisoner to her manipulations, a prisoner to my own self-doubt. And now, I was finally out. That night, I went home, sat on my couch, and let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for years. For the first time in a long time, my life was mine again. No more drama, no more legal battles, no more Monica. She had spent years trying to drag me down into the mud with her. And in the end, she had buried herself instead. And me? I had finally walked away clean. I should have trusted my gut. From the moment Camille told me her mother invited us to Thanksgiving dinner, something in me bristled. Not because I don't enjoy a good meal or because I don't love my wife's family, well, most of them, but because in 6 years of marriage, Melinda Royce had never once asked me to her house. Not for birthdays, not for Christmas, not even to help move a couch when Camille's father threw his back out. Her silence had been her answer. And now, suddenly, she wanted us all together? She even asked what kind of wine you like. Camille said as we sat in the kitchen, a hopeful glimmer in her eyes. Maybe she's finally trying, babe. I nodded slowly, not wanting to puncture the small hope she was clinging to. I could have said a lot in that moment. Like how Melinda had once referred to me as that accountant with the baby face at a family barbecue, thinking I wasn't within earshot. Or the time she sent Camille a list of fertility clinics with a just in case your real man isn't producing. But I bit my tongue. Camille wanted peace. And deep down, I wanted it too. So I said, let's do it. But the moment we pulled up to the Royce's estate that Thursday morning, I knew I'd made a mistake. It was cold out, early November chill creeping into my collar as I helped Camille out of the car with the pie she made. The house stood like a monument to old money and older grudges. White columns, tall hedges, and that American flag flapping like it was guarding something sacred. Melinda's version of patriotism was having Thanksgiving in a house that looked like George Washington might have once sneezed in it. Maybe this'll be good, Camille whispered, her voice trembling just slightly. She knew it too. That tension, that pressure, that feeling like we were walking into something staged. We stepped inside and were met by her brother, Mason, who barely looked up from his phone. Hey, he muttered, before turning his attention back to whatever stocks or sports scores he was obsessing over. Her younger sister Trinity appeared next, all glowing and maternal, her newborn twins strapped to her chest like trophies. She looked like a goddess in cream cashmere, surrounded by cooing relatives. And then came Melinda. She glided down the staircase like a queen at her own coronation. Hair curled, pearl earrings, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, look who finally made it, she said, kissing Camille's cheek and then glancing at me with the kind of warmth you reserve for someone tracking dirt across a clean floor. I smiled politely. Happy Thanksgiving, Melinda. She looked me over and leaned in, lowering her voice just enough to still be heard by everyone nearby. No gifts, she said with a raise of her eyebrow, loud enough to make Trinity smirk. I shrugged. Camille brought her famous sweet potato pie. And you? She asked, still smiling. I didn't answer. I just held up the wine bag in my hand and walked toward the dining room. Camille squeezed my hand. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't be, I said. I'm used to it. The truth is, I wasn't. Not really. You don't get used to being made to feel like the spare tire of a marriage. Like you're just there in case someone better doesn't come along. We mingled, we smiled, we made polite conversation. Melinda introduced me to someone as Camille's husband, Theo. He does accounting or something. That was followed by a lecture about how real men use their hands, not just calculators. I poured myself a generous glass of wine. Then the dinner bell rang. Everyone shuffled into the dining room. A massive table had been set, stretching nearly the length of the room. Crystal glasses, fine china, candlesticks like miniature obelisks. It looked like a magazine spread. Melinda was orchestrating seating like a symphony conductor. Mason, here. Trinity, next to Mom. Harold, head of the table. And Camille, sweetie, you're right here, next to your husband. I made my way toward the spot she indicated. But as I reached the chair, I froze. There it was. A bright pink plastic plate, the kind you give to toddlers to stop them from breaking real dishes. It was decorated with cartoon unicorns and smiling suns, with a matching fork and spoon that looked like they came from a kid's birthday party. In front of everyone. While everyone else had elegant white porcelain, I got the toy plate. I looked at Camille. Her face had gone pale. What is this? I asked, quiet but clear. Melinda didn't even blink. Well, she said, sipping from her wine glass, since you're impotent and can't give my daughter children, I figured you might as well eat like one. The room went still. I could hear the clink of Mason's fork against his glass. I could feel the burn rising in my chest. Camille's mouth opened in horror. Trinity actually gasped. One of the babies let out a small whine, almost like even they could sense the venom in the air. My vision tunneled slightly, but I didn't yell. I didn't throw the plate across the room, though I wanted to. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a white envelope. The one I'd carried for weeks. The one Camille asked me not to ever show. And then, I looked up at Melinda. Actually, I said, My voice calm, steady. I have something to show everyone. The smile on her face twitched. What are you doing? Camille whispered, her voice barely audible. I turned to her gently. I'm sorry, love, but this ends today. I placed the envelope on the table, right next to the unicorns and smiling suns. Because if they wanted a circus, I'd give them a final act they wouldn't forget. We pulled up to the Royce estate just after noon, and the sky looked like it had swallowed the sun. That sort of gray, hollow overcast that feels like the day itself is bracing for a storm. I parked the car in the long driveway behind Mason's ridiculous cherry red convertible, the one he bought after getting promoted at his finance firm. He always parked crooked, like even his car refused to share space with anyone else. Camille smoothed her dress in the passenger seat and glanced at the front of the house. It looks festive, she said, though her voice betrayed a bit of doubt. Melinda probably hired someone to decorate, I replied, stepping out and grabbing the pie from the back seat. God forbid she hang a wreath herself. Camille gave me a look, part scolding, part amused. Please, she said softly. Just today? No jabs. Let's get through this. Okay, I said. Just for today. The front door swung open before we even made it to the steps. Trinity stood there with both babies strapped to her front in some kind of baby harness contraption, a glass of wine already in her hand. Finally, she chirped, barely hiding the edge in her voice. We thought you were skipping. Happy Thanksgiving, Trinity, Camille said, offering her a quick kiss on the cheek. I nodded politely. Come in, she said, stepping aside like she owned the place. Mason and Mom are already half a bottle in. As we stepped into the foyer, I was hit by the scent of cinnamon and something overly floral, like the whole house had been sprayed with potpourri and anxiety. The crystal chandelier sparkled overhead, a grandiose centerpiece in a home that felt more curated than lived in. And then I saw him. Mason, sitting on the velvet love seat in the drawing room, legs crossed, holding a tumbler of scotch like he was starring in his own holiday movie. He looked up from his phone and smirked. Well, if it isn't the Royce accountant, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Hi, Mason, Camille said quickly before I could respond. Melinda's voice cut through the hallway like a bell tower. They're here. She entered from the dining room wearing a burgundy cashmere sweater and pearls that looked real enough to strangle someone with. Her lips were painted too red, her eyes too sharp. Camille, she said, arms open. Sweetheart, look at you. Camille smiled and accepted the hug. Then Melinda turned to me and offered nothing. No hug, no handshake, just a glance. I didn't expect affection. I would have settled for decency. We brought pie, Camille offered. How thoughtful, Melinda replied, not even looking at it. I suppose it'll go well with the assortment I already made. Then came the moment I should have expected, but still caught me off guard. Her eyes flicked to my hands. No gifts, she asked, again loud enough for everyone to hear. She had a knack for turning questions into knives. I inhaled through my nose, steady. We figured dessert was a good contribution. Of course, she said with a small smile. Just thought maybe Theo would bring something for the babies. It's their first Thanksgiving, after all. I glanced at Trinity, who was busy adjusting the headband on one of her twins. She didn't look up. I doubted she even cared. But Melinda wanted the moment to sting. Camille stepped in. We'll go put our coats away. Smart move. Get out before the opening jabs turned into open war. We headed down the hallway to the guest room, where we usually left our things. As we passed the kitchen, I saw Melinda whispering something to Mason, who chuckled and shook his head. I didn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. I'd spent 6 years reading between her lines. If she was kind, it was only to set you up for a harder fall. We returned to the living room where most of the family had gathered. Trinity's husband, Felix, was wrangling one of the babies who had spit up on his sleeve. Melinda walked around with a tray of spiced cider like she was the first lady of Thanksgiving. I accepted a glass and stood near the fireplace while Camille chatted with her Aunt Joyce about yoga retreats and essential oils. I could feel eyes glancing toward me every so often, nothing direct, just those side glances people make when they're trying to read a headline off your face. I sipped the cider. Too sweet. Then I checked my watch. Dinner's almost ready, Melinda announced cheerfully, so everyone find your seat. We all drifted toward the dining room like her words pulled us with invisible strings. That room looked like a magazine cover. Polished oak table, perfect white tablecloth, gold-rimmed china, candles, handwritten place cards. A roast turkey the size of a toddler in the center. I scanned the table. Mason's place was front and center. Trinity next to their parents. Camille's spot was 3 chairs from the head, beside me. Then I saw it. My plate. Pink. Plastic. Covered in dancing unicorns, stars, and smiling suns. A matching cartoon fork and spoon. I stared at it, half expecting it to disappear. Maybe it was a joke. A mistake. It wasn't. Melinda passed behind me and, without even glancing, said, "Since you're impotent and can't give my daughter children, you might as well eat like one." There was a moment of pure stillness. Like the entire room exhaled at once and then held its breath. Trinity looked stunned. Felix blinked. Camille's mouth parted, a soft whisper escaping. "Mom." Someone let out a half laugh that turned into a cough. My throat tightened, but I didn't speak. Not yet. Instead, I took a slow breath, reached into the inside pocket of my coat, and felt the envelope brush against my fingers. I hadn't planned to use it. I'd brought it for closure, just in case. Now it felt necessary. I slipped my fingers around the paper. Camille looked at me in horror. "Theo," she said softly. "Please. Not here." I nodded once, not making any promises. Because the decision was already made. Let them have their show. They just didn't realize I'd brought the final scene. I didn't sit right away. I stood there, staring at the plate like it might disappear if I just blinked hard enough. But there it stayed, plastic pink, grinning with unicorns and sunshine like some cruel inside joke. The matching fork and spoon, rounded and rubber-tipped as if to keep me from hurting myself, only made it worse. The entire thing looked like it belonged in a daycare, not a Thanksgiving dining room surrounded by crystal and gold-rimmed china. The longer I stood, the more the silence spread. No one knew where to look. Camille was frozen beside me, her hand halfway between reaching for mine and clutching her stomach. Mason leaned back in his seat, clearly amused. Trinity glanced from me to Melinda, unsure whether to laugh or wince. Even her baby seemed to quiet down as if the air itself had shifted. Melinda didn't sit either. She hovered near her seat like she was posing for a family portrait, her fingers delicately resting on the back of her chair, chin lifted slightly. The queen of the table. "That seat is for you, Theo," she said sweetly, like she was offering me a gift. "Don't be shy." I turned my head slowly toward her, and for a moment I didn't recognize the sound of my own voice. "Are you serious?" She blinked at me, her expression full of polite confusion. "What? It's just a plate." "No," I said, my voice firmer this time. "It's not." Camille stepped in quickly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, this is too much." Melinda shrugged. "It's Thanksgiving. It's a joke. Lighten up. I thought we were family." "Jokes usually involve people laughing," I said, still standing, still not touching that seat. "Does anyone here think this is funny?" Mason smirked but stayed silent. Trinity shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Camille looked at me, then at her mother, then back to me again. Torn in that impossible place between the family she came from and the one she chose. Melinda finally sat down with a long, exaggerated sigh, as if I were the one causing a scene. "Honestly, it's not that deep. But if you're going to make this awkward, then by all means." I should have walked out. Every inch of my body told me to leave. To take Camille's hand, get back in the car, and spend Thanksgiving somewhere peaceful. Somewhere kind. But I didn't. Because something shifted inside me in that moment, not just anger, but clarity. A cold, quiet knowing that this wasn't going to stop unless I made it stop. So I sat down. Right there, at the end of the grand table, across from Mason and 2 seats down from the woman who believed I was less than a man. I placed my cloth napkin in my lap. And then, deliberately, I reached into my coat pocket. The envelope was still warm from being close to my chest. I held it gently, like something sacred, and placed it next to the pink plate with slow precision. My hands didn't tremble. Camille's eyes went wide. "Theo," she whispered urgently, "not here." "I didn't come here to be humiliated," I said quietly, just to her. "I know," she whispered back. "But please don't do this. Not like this." Across the table, Melinda poured herself another glass of wine, looking quite pleased. "Camille, are you seriously defending this overreaction? It's a plastic plate. He's acting like I ran him over with a bus." "No, Melinda," I said, finally raising my voice slightly. "You're acting like I'm invisible. Like the last 3 years of pain and confusion and whispered accusations never happened. Like everything that's been thrown at me, from the passive-aggressive comments to the mail infertility pamphlets, was just a little harmless teasing." "You're being dramatic," she said. Again, Camille stood up, and that got everyone's attention. She wasn't a loud person. Camille was the gentle one, the peacemaker. But her voice came out sharp and clear this time. Stop. All of you. Just stop. Everyone went still. She looked around the table, her eyes fierce. My husband has been blamed, mocked, and disrespected by this family for years. For something we never talked about, because it was private, because it was painful. And now you've dragged it out in front of everyone like it's some kind of party trick. Melinda blinked, clearly caught off guard. Camille turned to me. I told you not to bring the papers. I asked you to let it go. But now, seeing this, she motioned toward the plate, her voice cracking. I understand why you had to. I didn't move. Not yet. Then Camille slowly nodded. Do it. That was the permission I hadn't known I was waiting for. I stood up and took the envelope in my hand. I want to make something clear, I began, addressing the whole table. We've been trying to have children for 3 years. And for 3 years, I've taken the silent blame. I've watched people, especially one person, imply that I was somehow less of a man, that I was the reason Camille doesn't have a child yet. And I kept my mouth shut. Out of respect. Melinda raised her glass again but didn't sip. Her face had gone rigid. But respect, I continued, goes both ways. I opened the envelope slowly and removed the single page inside. These are results from a fertility clinic. They're not mine. Mine came back normal. These are Camille's. I let the words settle. She was diagnosed with premature ovarian failure. Her egg supply is gone. No natural conception is possible. And she's known this. I've known this. We've tried hormone treatments. We've discussed IVF with donors. We've gone through grief and hope and back again. Together. Trinity had stopped chewing. Felix looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Mason was finally silent. Camille sat back down slowly, her hand trembling in her lap. I never said anything, I added, softer now, because it wasn't anyone's business. But if my manhood is going to be mocked with pink plastic at a dinner table, then let's put the truth out there. I folded the page and set it beside my untouched plate. Then I sat down again. Melinda didn't say a word. Her wine glass was still in her hand, but her grip had tightened so hard that her knuckles had turned white. She stared at me like I'd just spoken in another language. Harold cleared his throat at the head of the table. Well, he said awkwardly, shall we say grace? No one answered. No one even moved. Except me. I reached for my napkin again and started cutting my turkey. For a second, maybe longer, everything in that room stopped. I don't mean people just paused. I mean the air itself seemed to go still, like the house was holding its breath, afraid to make a sound after what had just been said. The test results sat on the table, plain white against all the polished wood and gold-rimmed china. A stark little truth dropped into the middle of a curated holiday lie. No one reached for the turkey. No one passed a dish. Even the babies in Trinity's arms went silent, as if the weight of the words had pressed down on every soul in that room, no matter how small. Camille sat beside me, shoulders tight, eyes fixed on the envelope. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her silence was louder than any outburst. And honestly, I didn't know whether that silence was heartbreak or relief. Melinda, for once in her life, didn't know what to do with her mouth. Her lips parted slightly, eyes locked on the paper in front of me like it might suddenly burst into flames. She hadn't moved since I sat back down, wine glass still clutched between two tense fingers, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the stem. Harold, her husband, quiet, armless Harold, was the first to blink out of the trance. He cleared his throat and reached for the carving knife. Well, he stammered. Maybe we should, No, Camille said suddenly, her voice sharp. It cut through the tension like glass shattering on tile. We're not going to pretend that didn't happen. Not this time. Not again. Everyone turned to look at her. Even I wasn't expecting her to speak up like that. Camille was calm by nature, someone who handled conflict like it was hot coal. Pass it quickly, don't get burned. But something had changed in her. I saw it in her face. She was done carrying guilt that day. Not because I was ashamed of them, but because I thought I could still protect this family from itself. From the judgment, from the assumptions, from the cruelty disguised as jokes. Melinda shifted slightly, but Camille wasn't finished. I've spent years trying to earn your approval, Mom. Years pretending your comments didn't hurt. Years laughing when you poked fun at us not having children, like that was ever a joke to me. Or to him. She nodded toward me. I let it happen, and that's on me. The room was so still I could hear the ticking of the clock above the fireplace. I didn't want you to know I was broken, Camille said finally, the words catching in her throat. But I'm not anymore. Because I'm not hiding it. I'm not hiding me. And I'm sure as hell done letting you humiliate my husband to protect your fantasy of what a family should be. She stopped. Her voice cracked on the last word, and I saw a tear slide down her cheek. She wiped it quickly with the back of her hand, not wanting pity, just release. Across the table, Trinity set her glass down with a loud clink. You have no idea how long I've wanted someone to say that, she said quietly. Melinda turned toward her daughter in disbelief. Trinity. No, Mom, she interrupted, her voice calm but cold. You've done this for years. Controlled the conversation. Weaponized concern. You did it to me when I married Felix. You said I was rushing into motherhood just to beat Camille to the finish line. You even told Aunt Joyce that Camille wasn't cut out for kids because she was too career-focused. And now look. Joyce looked up from her seat at the far end and muttered, she told me that. All right. Melinda's mouth opened, then closed. For a woman who always had the last word, silence didn't fit her well. I took a sip of water and glanced at Mason. He hadn't said a word through any of it. No smug comments, no sarcastic digs. He just stared at his plate, fork turning slowly in his hand like he couldn't decide what to do with it. For once, he looked unsure. Harold set the carving knife down again and exhaled. Well, I think that's more truth than this table has seen in a decade. Maybe ever, Trinity added. Still, Melinda said nothing. Her face was pale now, like all the color had been drained from it. Her shoulders were stiff, lips slightly trembling, as if every insult she'd ever thrown was rushing back toward her all at once. Finally, she stood. She didn't make a speech. Didn't defend herself. She just stood up, walked out of the dining room, and disappeared down the hall toward the kitchen. The silence that followed was different. Not heavy, but light. Like something had been lifted. Like the room had finally exhaled. Camille leaned into me, resting her head briefly against my shoulder. You okay? She whispered. I'm fine, I said, quietly. Are you? She nodded, wiping another tear with the corner of her napkin. I think so. For the first time in a long time, people started moving again. Felix took one of the babies upstairs to change a diaper. Joyce began pouring more wine. Trinity started collecting empty plates from the kids' end of the table. It wasn't normal. It wasn't comfortable. But it was real. And for this family, that was new. Camille turned toward me. I'm sorry it had to happen like this. I reached for her hand under the table. I'm not. You're not. No, I said. Because now it's out. No more pretending. No more whispers behind closed doors. Camille gave a soft laugh. You and that unicorn plate, she said, shaking her head. I'll never forget it. Neither will I said. I glanced at the plate again. It looked smaller now, ridiculous even. But it had done its job. It had exposed the cracks hiding beneath polished smiles and picture-perfect dinners. And sometimes, you need something to break you. Before anyone even thinks about fixing it. I didn't plan on laying it all out like that. I didn't walk into that house with some grand vision of turning Thanksgiving into a courtroom. But sometimes the weight of silence builds up like a dam, and all it takes is one crack, one pink, plastic plate, and suddenly everything you've been holding in for years comes flooding out. And once it's out, you can't take it back. Not that I wanted to. The envelope still sat on the table beside me, unopened now but exposed. Like a piece of evidence laid bare for everyone to see. I didn't need to hold it up again. The words I'd spoken had already lodged themselves into everyone's minds like thorns. No more wondering. No more assumptions. No more snide jokes about trying harder or suggestions about freezing peace. The mystery had been solved, and no one saw it coming. I looked across the table and watched Trinity pick at her mashed potatoes without eating. The color had drained from her face, and her usually chirpy demeanor had dimmed into something more serious. Camille still sat beside me, back straight, hands folded in her lap, her eyes heavy but unashamed. I could feel her breath start to steady next to me. Her father, Harold, finally spoke again. I remember when you both started talking about kids, he said, voice low, like he was reminiscing about a happier time. Your mom said it was just nerves. That you were too modern, waiting too long, too focused on work. He shook his head slowly. But I watched the way you looked at babies, Camille. Every time Trinity brought hers around, your whole body ached for one. I could tell. Camille's lower lip trembled slightly. Harold looked over at me, and I saw how you looked at her. Like you'd give anything to take that pain away from her. I didn't answer. I couldn't. For all the ways Melinda had mocked me, Camille's father had never joined in. He had mostly stayed in the background, one hand on his scotch and the other on the remote control, avoiding the crossfire. I'd always assumed he was just disengaged. But now I realized he'd been watching, quietly, maybe even helplessly. I should have said something sooner, he added. Should have shut it down. Camille offered him a soft smile, but I could see the hurt underneath it. Melinda still hadn't returned. Maybe she'd gone upstairs to hide in the shadow of her own embarrassment. Or maybe she was in the kitchen, pacing, rewriting the scene in her head so she could return with the perfect retort. With Melinda, silence was never a natural state. It was strategy. But this time, I think the silence had beaten her. I still don't understand why you never told anyone, Trinity said suddenly, her voice gentler now. Why you both kept it so secret. Camille turned toward her sister, and for a moment I thought she might deflect. But she didn't. Because Mom would have made it about her, she said plainly. She would have blamed Theo. Or she would have said I waited too long. Or that I was selfish. She would have spun it into something ugly. And I didn't want our pain turned into another Royce scandal to whisper about over cocktails. Trinity nodded slowly. You're not wrong. Camille reached for her glass of water and sipped. Then, setting it down, she added, we didn't tell anyone because we were still grieving. We were still processing it. Every time I saw a pregnancy announcement, or walked by a stroller, or saw a kid giggling in a grocery cart, I felt like the world was reminding me of what I couldn't have. She turned to me. And through it all, he stayed. Every doctor's appointment, every round of tests, every long night where I cried into the pillow because my body betrayed me. Theo never once blamed me, never once pulled away, never made me feel like I was less. I looked down, not out of shame, but to keep my composure. You didn't have to say that, I whispered. Yes, I did, she replied. Across the table, Mason finally stirred. He had been silent since the moment I revealed the diagnosis, his plate untouched, his smugness gone. And when he did speak, his voice lacked its usual bite. I always thought you were the weak one, he said, looking directly at me. Camille flinched slightly, but I held his gaze. And now? I asked. He nodded slowly, almost like it hurt. Now I'm not so sure. That from Mason was the closest I'd ever get to an apology. I didn't know, he added, quieter. I mean, I had no idea it was Camille. You weren't supposed to, I said. It wasn't about protecting her reputation. It was about protecting her heart. A long pause stretched between us. Mason sat back in his chair and let out a breath. Well, he said, picking up his fork again. Now I feel like a jackass. Trinity chuckled dryly. You kind of are. And then, as if on cue, the baby in her lap let out a loud gurgling cry, reminding everyone in the room that life continued, even when we felt like it didn't. Felix took the baby gently, standing up with a nod toward Camille. For what it's worth, I'm sorry too. And I admire how you two handled it. Most people would have fallen apart. We almost did, Camille said softly. But you didn't, he said. We ate, finally. Quietly, reflectively. The food was still warm. The wine still poured. But the meal felt different now, less like a celebration and more like a wake for the years we'd lost to pretending. Still, it wasn't bitter. If anything, there was a strange calm about it, like the calm that follows a long-awaited storm. When dessert arrived, pecan and pumpkin pies arranged with unnecessary perfection on sterling platters, Camille didn't move to serve. She just sat there, resting her head gently against my shoulder. I'm tired, she whispered. Me too, but I feel lighter. I kissed the top of her head. That's what happens when you stop carrying something that was never yours to carry alone. Then, as the final slices of pie were served and the clinking of forks began again, Melinda returned. She didn't speak. Not yet. But when I looked up, I saw something I'd never seen on her face. Not anger. Not smugness. Not control. Shame. And maybe, just maybe, the start of understanding. Melinda didn't say a word when she stepped back into the room. She stood in the doorway for a moment, backlit by the kitchen light behind her. Her sweater looked slightly rumpled, her lipstick had faded, and her eyes, always sharp, always judgmental, looked strangely vacant. For once, the woman who usually commanded the room just existed in it. Quiet. Small. She walked slowly back to her seat, sat down, and folded her napkin in her lap with practiced elegance, like muscle memory was carrying her where her mind had gone numb. Nobody moved. Camille didn't speak. Trinity avoided eye contact. Mason picked up his wine but didn't sip it. Even the babies were quiet again, as if something in the room told them this moment wasn't one to interrupt. I watched her. Not out of spite. Not with the satisfaction people might expect. I wasn't gloating. I was observing something I never thought I'd witness. The unraveling of Melinda Royce. It didn't happen with screaming or broken dishes. No chairs were thrown. No dramatic exits. Her fall was quieter than I imagined. Like watching a fine porcelain statue develop hairline cracks too small to notice at first, but spreading, inevitable. She reached for her glass of wine and took a sip. Her hand trembled slightly, just enough for the rim to tap her front tooth. "Dessert's very good," she said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who made the pecan?" Trinity blinked, then hesitantly answered, "Camille did." "Like always." Melinda nodded and set her glass down. "It's perfect." Camille didn't respond. Melinda's eyes drifted toward me. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She looked like she wanted to say something, maybe apologize, maybe explain. But nothing landed. Just silence and the faint clink of forks on porcelain as the rest of the table awkwardly resumed dessert. Harold watched his wife carefully, cautiously. He'd seen her break down before, I imagined, but never publicly. This was different. This wasn't a meltdown. It was a quiet collapse, and he didn't seem to know how to catch her this time. I picked up my fork and resumed eating, if only to do something with my hands. The pie really was good, even if my appetite had long since vanished. Camille sat upright now, composed but distant. Her eyes weren't on the table, or the food, or even her mother. They were somewhere far off, processing, sorting, healing in the small ways people do when the chaos pauses long enough to breathe. Melinda finally spoke again. "I didn't know," she said. The sentence came out flat, empty. I set my fork down. "You didn't want to know." That got her attention. She turned to me, her eyes glistening. "That's not fair, isn't it?" I asked, my voice even. Camille shifted slightly, not to stop me, just to show she was listening. "You didn't want to know the truth," I continued, "because the truth would have ruined the story you built in your head. The one where I was the weak link. The problem. The one who couldn't give your daughter the life you wanted for her. I didn't mean to." "You meant everything you said," Camille interrupted. Her voice wasn't angry. It was tired, resigned. "You've meant every jab, every comment, every suggestion that I married beneath me. You knew exactly what you were doing." Melinda flinched, and I saw it. That tiny wince in her shoulders. Maybe the words were finally reaching her. Or maybe it was just the first time anyone had ever said them out loud. "I thought I was protecting you," she said. "I really believe that." "No," Camille replied. "You were protecting your pride. You were embarrassed that your daughter didn't have a baby bump to show off while your friends bragged about their grandchildren. You wanted something to blame, and Theo was convenient." Melinda's jaw tensed. Her fingers twisted the edge of her napkin slowly. "I just didn't want you to miss out on the life I had." "And maybe I didn't want your life," Camille snapped. That silenced everyone again. Camille rarely snapped. But when she did, it was like thunder rolling over a quiet field. Melinda stared at her, stunned. Camille went on. "You think I've been miserable without kids? That I cry myself to sleep every night wishing for some suburban fantasy you can parade in front of the neighbors. And yes, it hurt. For a long time, it hurt like hell. But I found joy in other things. In work. In travel. In my marriage. You didn't see that because it didn't fit your image of what my life should be." "I was wrong," Melinda said softly. Camille tilted her head. "What exactly were you wrong about?" Melinda hesitated. Then she looked at me. "I was wrong about him." I blinked. Of all the things I expected her to say, that wasn't one of them. "I thought Theo wasn't strong enough," she went on. "Too quiet. Too soft. But it takes strength to carry a burden like that. To stay silent. To protect someone from judgment. To sit at this table year after year and never lash out." Her voice cracked. "You've been stronger than I ever gave you credit for." My throat tightened, but I said nothing. I just looked at Camille, who was watching her mother like she was seeing a stranger trying to wear a familiar face. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Melinda added. "Not now, but I needed to say it. Out loud. Before it ate me alive." Camille looked at me, silently asking what I thought. I didn't know how to answer. What do you do when a person like that, proud, callous, unbending, finally breaks? You don't kick them while they're down, but you don't rush to lift them either. You let them sit with the damage. Let them feel the porcelain cracking, because only then will they decide whether they want to fix it. Melinda stood slowly. "I'll be in the kitchen," she said, "if anyone wants to talk." She walked out quietly. No dramatic exit. Just gone. The room remained still for a long while. Then Trinity reached for her water, cleared her throat, and whispered, "Well, This is the weirdest Thanksgiving we've ever had. A chuckle escaped from Mason. Yeah, no contest. Joyce raised her glass. To the weirdest one, and the realest. We all raised our glasses too. Even Camille. I looked down at the pink plastic plate still sitting beside me. Still bright. Still ridiculous. But somehow, it no longer felt like a weapon. It felt like a relic. A symbol of what was, and what might never be again. Melinda didn't return for the rest of dinner. She stayed upstairs, door shut, and the house finally exhaled. For once, the Royce home didn't feel like a courtroom. No one was on trial. No one was measuring worth with smug looks or backhanded compliments. The tension that had ruled every holiday meal for years was gone, not replaced with comfort, but with something more honest. A strange, quiet vulnerability. Harold excused himself to bring a plate up to Melinda. He didn't say much, just rose from his chair, took a generous helping of turkey and mashed potatoes, and disappeared up the carpeted staircase. When he returned, he looked like someone who'd just sat through a storm and realized the roof still held, but only barely. She's not speaking, he said quietly as he sat down again. Maybe that's for the best. Nobody disagreed. Camille sat beside me, her body slightly angled toward mine, one leg hooked gently around my ankle beneath the table. It was the kind of closeness that didn't need words. A quiet confirmation that we were still here, still standing, still together. I didn't expect that, she said softly, leaning toward me. What part? All of it. You. Her. The way the whole thing just cracked open. I looked down at my now cold plate. The pink one had been replaced with a real plate at some point. Joyce, I think, had quietly swapped it out while no one was looking. But I still saw the plastic edges in my memory, the way it glowed under the chandelier, ridiculous and cruel. I didn't plan to say anything, I admitted. But when she put that plate down, I know, Camille said quickly. You had to. And I'm glad you did. Her voice wavered slightly. She wasn't just talking about the plate. She was talking about years of swallowing hurt. Years of pretending she didn't hear the comments. Years of playing the role of the perfect daughter while being slowly chipped away inside. I placed my hand over hers. Across the table, Mason was uncharacteristically quiet. He'd taken to sipping his wine in silence, eyes fixed on the tablecloth like it held answers he didn't want to say out loud. The smugness had drained from him. So had the snide remarks. It was almost unsettling, like watching a lion voluntarily curl up in a kennel. You okay? I asked Camille again, just to be sure. I think so, she said. I think I'm still figuring out what okay means now. That made sense to me. So much of our lives had been shaped by unspoken things, expectations, assumptions, shame. Melinda's need to control, to perform, to preserve the illusion of perfection. Our silence had kept the family dynamic intact for years. But it wasn't intact. It had been rotting from the inside. And today, it finally caved. I didn't regret it. But I also didn't feel victorious. Because the truth didn't come without cost. Upstairs, a door creaked faintly. No footsteps followed. We all heard it, but no one commented. Instead, Trinity started clearing plates, her usual chirpy energy dimmed into something more focused. She moved slower than usual, more carefully, like someone carrying something fragile. Maybe she was. Her husband Felix took the babies to the playpen in the living room, muttering something about getting them away from this emotional roller coaster. I envied his simplicity. His role in all this was minimal, peripheral. Mine wasn't. Do you think she'll tell? Neither did I. The same was silence and performance and paper-thin civility. If we were going to build something real, something better, it had to come from truth. And truth came at a price. Mason finally spoke. You know what's messed up? He said, still not looking up. Everyone waited. I always thought you were the weak one, he muttered. The outsider. The one who got lucky marrying in. I let him speak. I didn't interrupt. But you sat here and took it. Year after year. Smile after fake smile. You never swung back. You never snapped. And today, you stood up and said the thing we've all been too scared to say. You weren't the weak one. I blinked, unsure how to respond. I was, he added. That shocked me more than anything else that day. Trinity, who had just returned with a new tray of pie slices, paused at the sound of his words. She didn't mock him. She just handed him a slice and walked away, like his confession earned him dessert. Camille exhaled beside me. I feel like we've been pretending for so long I forgot how to stop. You just did, I said. I know, she whispered. And it feels strange, but also good. We sat there for a while, just breathing, letting it all settle. No more explosions, No more speeches. Just quiet. Stillness. The breakdown wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. But it was real. The walls didn't come down with a bang. They just eroded until there was nowhere left to hide. Melinda didn't return that night. Harold told us later she asked him to sleep in the guest room. She's thinking, he said. And she doesn't do that often. No one laughed. It wasn't a joke. It was a truth wrapped in resignation. As guests began to trickle out, there were more hugs than usual. Trinity hugged me tightly and whispered, "Thank you for saying what we couldn't." Joyce kissed me on the cheek and said, "You were brave, even if it was messy." Mason gave me a single nod. Nothing more. But it meant something. Camille and I collected our things, her pie dish, a small container of leftovers, a scarf she almost forgot on the banister, and walked quietly to the car. She looked back once toward the house. I asked, "You okay?" She smiled faintly. For the first time, I think I actually might be. I opened her door and helped her in, then climbed into the driver's seat. As we drove away, I reached into the bag of leftovers. Right on top, wrapped in foil, was the pink plastic plate. Camille saw it and burst into quiet laughter. Not bitter, not mocking, just the kind of laugh that comes after a long, painful release. She picked it up and held it for a moment, turning it over in her hands. "Should we throw it away?" I asked. She shook her head, smiling softly. "No, let's keep it." "Why?" "Because it broke everything open," she said. And maybe that's exactly what we needed. The house was unusually quiet when we left. Not silent in the peaceful sense, but quiet like a theater after the actors have taken their final bow. Something had ended. Something had shifted. Camille didn't say much during the drive home. She kept turning the pink plate over in her lap, staring at it like it was an artifact, as if she still couldn't believe that one piece of plastic had carried so much weight. We got home just before 9. Our house felt smaller than usual, but not in a bad way. It felt safe, honest, real. No chandeliers or heirloom china, just the hum of the fridge and the faint smell of cinnamon from Camille's pie leftovers. She dropped her coat over the chair by the door, kicked off her shoes, and sat down at the kitchen table. I joined her, setting the pie dish on the counter and taking 2 forks from the drawer. Neither of us wanted more food, but we picked at the pie anyway. There's something about shared silence after a hard day. It's its own kind of conversation. "You know what I keep thinking about?" she said finally, her voice tired but clear. "What?" "How long we pretended." I nodded. "Yeah. Years, Theo," she said. 3 years of smiling through it. Laughing off baby jokes. Sending fake updates to people who didn't even deserve to know. I told Trinity once we were waiting for the right time. I told my coworkers we were focused on traveling. But really, I was just hoping the next blood test would be different. I reached across the table and took her hand. "We thought if we waited long enough, it would fix itself," I said. "That maybe it was just stress, or diet, or bad timing." Camille's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "And when it didn't, I thought I was the failure. You weren't." "I know that now," she whispered. "But I didn't know it then." That broke my heart. Not because it was new, but because I had lived beside that pain without knowing how deep it truly went. "And then my mother," she continued, voice shaking now, "sat there today and humiliated you in front of everyone." And for a second, I froze. I actually froze. I should have stood up the second I saw that plate. "You stood up when it mattered," I said. "And that means more than you know." She nodded slowly. Then she reached into her purse, pulled out a small folded piece of paper, and slid it toward me. I looked at it, confused. "What's this?" "A fertility clinic brochure," she said. "But a different kind. One that deals with donor embryos. I picked it up 2 weeks ago." "Why didn't you tell me?" "I wasn't ready," she admitted. "I didn't want to get your hopes up. Not after everything. But after today." I realized we've already lived through the worst of it. We survived that storm. Maybe now it's time to see what comes after. I opened the brochure and glanced through it. Photos of smiling couples, hopeful statistics, testimonials that made my throat tighten. Not because they promised miracles, but because they reminded me that we weren't alone. That there were people out there who had walked through the same fire and come out holding something new. I reached across the table and touched her cheek. "Let's do it. Let's see where this goes." She smiled then, a real smile. The kind I hadn't seen in a while. That weekend, we didn't visit anyone. We didn't take calls from family. We just stayed home, talked, watched old movies, and took long walks around the neighborhood. It was like we were rediscovering our marriage in the quiet aftermath. No pressure. No performance. Just us. Then, midweek, something unexpected happened. Camille got a text from her mother. Just 2 words. I'm sorry. No emojis. No long speech. No excuses. Just that. Camille stared at it for a long time, then put her phone down without responding. Are you going to reply? I asked gently. Not yet, she said, but I think I will. 2 days later, Melinda showed up at our front door. No warning. No entourage. Just her, standing on our porch in a pale blue coat and holding something in both hands. I opened the door, heart pounding. Theo, she said quietly. Is Camille home? She is, I said. Do you want to come in? She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Camille appeared in the hallway, her expression unreadable. Melinda looked at her daughter with a kind of uncertainty I'd never seen on her face before. I know I don't deserve to be here, she said, but I came to try anyway. Then she extended her hands. She was holding the pink plate, but it wasn't whole anymore. The plate had been broken, shattered, from the looks of it, and then pieced back together. Glued along every jagged line, its cheerful cartoon unicorns now interrupted by silver cracks. And in the center, where the face of the biggest unicorn had once smiled, the broken edges had been arranged into the shape of a heart. I destroyed it the night you left, Melinda said. Smashed it in the sink. But then I picked up the pieces. I don't know why. I just couldn't throw it away. Camille stepped forward slowly. She took the plate from her mother's hands and stared at it. A reminder, Melinda said, that even broken things can be made into something better, if you're willing to do the work. Camille's lips parted, but no words came out. Then, to my surprise, she stepped forward and wrapped her mother in a gentle hug. No tears, no apologies, just that simple, shaky embrace. And somehow, it meant more than 100 perfect speeches. We didn't become best friends after that. Melinda didn't turn into a warm and fuzzy grandmother figure overnight, but she started showing up. To clinic appointments, to counseling sessions, to quiet dinners where no one talked about success or failure, but just shared stories, hopes, and the small wins of everyday life. She even started knitting again. Baby booties, little hats. Not with pressure, not as assumptions, just as gifts, symbols, maybe even prayers. One night, Camille and I sat in bed going through paperwork for a new donor program. She held the glued plate in her lap as she reviewed medical forms, her thumb tracing the heart-shaped cracks. This plate used to represent everything that was wrong with our family, she said. Now, it reminds me of how much we've healed. It's still cracked, I said. So are we, she replied, smiling. And we're still here. It was a chilly Saturday morning when we walked into the fertility clinic hand in hand, not with the nervous excitement we had the first time years ago, but with something deeper, something steadier. Camille had on a gray wool coat and no makeup, her hair tucked beneath a knitted beanie Melinda had made. I held the door for her, and as we stepped into the warm waiting room, I realized something remarkable. We weren't afraid anymore. There were still risks, still unknowns. But the shame? The silence? That had been buried back at that Thanksgiving table along with the pink plate. This was a new beginning, one we were choosing on our own terms. Melinda surprised us by showing up that day. We hadn't asked her to come. She didn't even text. She just appeared at the clinic 15 minutes before our consultation, holding a notebook and wearing a pair of reading glasses I didn't know she owned. Camille looked up from the sign-in sheet and blinked. Mom. I called the front desk, Melinda said, slightly out of breath. Told them I was coming. I wanted to learn. I want to understand what this actually means for you. Camille stared at her for a moment, then gave the smallest nod. Okay. So the three of us sat down together, flipping through pamphlets and asking questions. The doctor walked us through donor embryo options, surrogate programs, and even embryo adoption. Every path lined with technical terms and timelines that would have overwhelmed us months ago. But this time, we listened. We didn't panic. We didn't cry. We learned. Melinda asked smart questions. She didn't dominate the conversation, didn't press us with suggestions. She simply listened and took notes, her eyes occasionally flicking up to Camille, who seemed caught between shock and cautious appreciation. When the doctor stepped out to grab a folder, Melinda turned to us and said, I used to think a family had to look a certain way, that motherhood was the crown of womanhood. But I was wrong. Family isn't about biology. It's about showing up, over and over again. Camille didn't answer. She just reached over and squeezed her mother's hand. That night, back at home, We lit a fire in the living room and sat on the floor with mugs of tea, our legs tangled beneath a blanket. Camille held the glued-together pink plate in her lap, her fingers tracing the silver lines in the shape of a heart. "She's trying," she said softly. "I know," I replied. "Do you believe her?" I thought about that. Melinda had spent years crafting an image, enforcing control, drawing lines between who belonged and who didn't. But lately, those lines had started to blur. She still slipped sometimes, commented too harshly, interrupted too much, but then she'd apologize. Without prompting. That was new. "I don't think she knows how to undo everything," I said. "But I think she's willing to try." Camille leaned against me. "That's enough. For now." A few weeks later, we hosted a dinner at our house. Nothing fancy. Just a folding table, a pot roast, and 6 mismatched chairs squeezed into our small dining room. Mason came. So did Trinity and Felix with their twins in tow. Joyce brought wine and one of her strange kale salads. And Melinda, well, she brought paper plates. Everyone stared when she opened the bag and began setting them on the table. Trinity raised an eyebrow. "Since when do you use paper plates?" Melinda didn't flinch. "Since I realized perfect dishes don't make a perfect family." Camille smiled quietly and helped her set them down. We ate. We laughed. We told stories. For once, no one compared salaries or parenting styles. No one asked about due dates or pressured us for updates. They just shared space with us, the way families are supposed to. After dinner, as I was collecting cups from the table, Mason came up behind me and said, "I meant what I said before. You're the one holding this family together now." I turned to him. "I'm not trying to hold it together. I'm just done pretending." He nodded. "That's what I meant." The next day, we received a small box in the mail. No note. No label. Inside were the shards of another pink plate, this one shaped into a mosaic heart, almost identical to the first. Camille picked it up and smiled. "She made a second one," she said. "Why?" Camille turned it over and showed me the back. Etched in gold marker were the words. One for the past, one for the future. We didn't say anything after that. We just held each other in the kitchen and let the moment sit. Weeks passed. Appointments continued. We finalized our donor application. Every form we signed felt like we were chiseling away the final layers of grief and sculpting something new. Something ours. Then one night, Melinda came over for dinner with a flat cardboard box under her arm. "I brought you something," she said, placing it on the table. Camille and I opened it together. Inside was a table runner, cream-colored, stitched by hand with delicate green vines and bluebirds sewn along the border. In the center, embroidered in neat cursive, were the words, "Built from cracks, held together by choice." Camille traced the stitching with her fingers, her eyes glassy. "It's not perfect," Melinda said, sounding nervous. "It's beautiful," Camille said. We set it on the table that night and ate our takeout over it like it was a feast. Because in many ways, it was. The table we were building wasn't made of heirlooms or rigid expectations. It was made of late-night conversations, therapy sessions, shaky forgiveness, and small acts of showing up. It was built slowly, sometimes painfully, but it was real. And that was more than we ever had before. Christmas at the Royce house was nothing like it used to be. For starters, there were no place cards, no rigid seating arrangements, no passive-aggressive commentary over the ham. And most notably, every single person at the table was eating off paper plates. Not fancy ones, either. These were regular, store-bought, pastel-colored paper plates. The kind you find in the party aisle next to matching napkins with cartoon reindeer. At first glance, it seemed absurd. Laughable, even. A family that once measured worth in silver cutlery, now passing the gravy across flimsy discs of pressed pulp. But to us, it meant everything. Melinda stood at the head of the table, not to command attention, but to raise a small glass of cider and offer a toast. It wasn't her usual drawn-out performance. No stories about the family legacy. No awkward praise for Mason's latest bonus. Just a few simple words. "We're starting fresh," she said, eyes scanning each face. "No more traditions that hurt people, only ones that build them." Camille looked over at me, blinking back tears. I nodded, my own chest tight with emotion I hadn't expected to feel at a family holiday again. Across the table, Trinity smiled, holding one of the twins while her husband, Felix, tried to keep the other from eating the napkin. Joyce clinked her plastic cup against Mason's, who had traded his usual smugness for a humble grin. He hadn't spoken much since Thanksgiving, but his presence here mattered. Sometimes the right people show up quietly and stay. The food was simple. Pot roast, sweet potatoes, stuffing, some cranberry sauce straight from the can. Camille made her famous pecan pie, and I brought my usual bottle of mulled wine. Melinda had cooked most of the meal herself. Not catered, not outsourced. Homemade. Imperfect. Honest. As we ate, there was laughter. Not forced, not nervous, real laughter. Camille shared a story about our failed camping trip where a raccoon stole our marshmallows. Mason chimed in with a surprisingly self-deprecating joke about his terrible date with a woman who thought his name was Miles the entire night. Even Harold, normally quiet and observational, told a story about the year Melinda burned the Christmas turkey and tried to blame the oven manufacturer. When it came time for dessert, Camille disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a covered dish. But instead of placing it on the table, she walked around and handed something to each guest. A small, folded card. I looked at mine and opened it. Inside, in her handwriting, were 5 words. Thank you for showing up. That was it. No long message. No explanation. Just that. Melinda read hers twice, her lips pressed together, and gave Camille a slow, tearful nod. Then she stood and hugged her tight, like a mother who finally understood what love actually looks like when it's no longer measured against expectation. Camille hugged her back, and for the first time in my life, I saw them as equals. Not mother and daughter, not judge and defendant. Just 2 women, flawed, healing, holding each other in shared understanding. Later that night, when the dishes were cleared and the leftovers packed up in mismatched Tupperware, I stepped out onto the back porch. The cold air bit at my cheeks, but I didn't mind. I just needed a minute. A quiet breath to take it all in. Camille joined me a few moments later, wrapped in a blanket. You okay? She asked, resting her head on my shoulder. I am now. She leaned into me. Me too. We stood there for a while, looking out at the yard. The same one where Melinda used to host elaborate Easter egg hunts and carefully choreographed lawn parties. Tonight, it was quiet. Bare trees. A patch of snow. Nothing remarkable. And yet, it felt new. Different. This feels like peace, I said, surprised at how true the words were. Camille nodded. And it only took a unicorn plate and an emotional ambush to get us here. I laughed. Should we frame it? The plate. Yeah. Or maybe donate it to a museum of awkward family moments. She giggled, then grew thoughtful. Actually, I was thinking we could keep it. Put it on the wall of the nursery. I turned slowly. The nursery? Camille smiled, wide and glowing. We got the call this morning. Our donor application was approved. We start the embryo transfer cycle next month. I stared at her, heart thudding. Are you serious? She nodded, tears in her eyes. It's happening, Theo. And just like that, everything else melted away. All the hurt. All the tension, all the years of waiting. They didn't disappear, but they shifted. They became background to something brighter, something blooming. I pulled her close, wrapping both arms around her, and we stood like that in the cold, wrapped in something warmer than any blanket. The next day, Melinda sent a bouquet to our house. No glitter, no over-the-top arrangement, just soft blue hydrangeas with a note that read, "No more Finn." Thanksgiving, the day everything changed. That plate, once meant to insult, had become the symbol of our turning point. Proof that even something childish, something cruel, could be repurposed into something meaningful. A reminder that the things meant to break us often become the things that rebuild us. Weeks later, as we prepped for our first treatment, we made a new family tradition. Every time someone visits, they eat off a paper plate. It's not a joke. It's not a statement. It's just a symbol. A reminder that the table doesn't matter. The people at it do. So when our child finally arrives and one day asks us why there are no fancy dishes like other homes, we'll smile and tell them. This family was built with paper plates and peace. I still remember the exact moment I found out I wasn't invited to my wife's sister's wedding. Not through a heartfelt conversation. Not even through a passing mention. No, I discovered it the way someone finds out about a party they were never meant to know about. Through social media. I was in my office at the shop, finishing up some paperwork, when I absent-mindedly scrolled through my phone. And there it was, a picture so polished, so perfectly curated that it looked like it belonged on the front cover of some high-end wedding magazine. A beautifully designed invitation card, embossed with gold lettering, delicately placed on a white satin fabric. The caption read, "The countdown begins. Can't wait to celebrate with all my loved ones on the most special day of my life." all her loved ones. But not me. For a second, I just stared at it, my brain struggling to register what I was seeing. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe my invitation was still in the mail. Maybe she just hadn't gotten around to telling me in person. After all, I had spent the last 6 months bending over backward to make sure she had the wedding of her dreams. I was the one who paid for the venue deposit when Camille and her fiancé, Daniel, were short on cash. I was the one who covered the catering advance when my in-laws hesitated. I even gave her money for her wedding dress, ironically, one I hadn't even seen yet. So, of course, my name had to be on that guest list, right? I scrolled through the comments under the post, my stomach twisting. Friends, relatives, colleagues. Everyone was gushing about how excited they were to be part of the big day. Someone even joked about how exclusive the guest list must be. Exclusive. That's when the sick feeling started to creep in. I sent Camille a message, nothing dramatic, just a simple, "Hey, I saw the post. I never got my invite. Did it get lost?" And then I waited. My phone sat on the desk in front of me, screen up, as if I expected her reply to appear within seconds. But the 3 little dots never came. An hour passed. Then 2. By the time the sun had set, I had convinced myself I was overreacting. Maybe she was busy. Maybe she just forgot to reply. And then, at 10:34 p.m., my phone buzzed. "Camille, hey, I was going to talk to you about this. I hope you understand, but we had to make some tough choices with the guest list. It's a very curated event, you know? We had to keep it elegant. No offense, but you don't really fit the vibe. I know you'll be happy for me from afar, though. Love you." I read the message 3 times before it really sank in. I wasn't just forgotten. I was intentionally left out. And I knew exactly why. I wasn't like Camille's friends, the ones with their polished nails, expensive suits, and artificial laughs that filled high-end cocktail parties. I didn't work in an office with a shiny title or talk about investments over brunch. I owned an auto repair shop. A successful one, at that. The kind that made very good money, especially since I specialized in luxury vehicles. But that didn't matter to my wife's family. To them, I wasn't a businessman. I was just a grease-stained mechanic. A guy who always smelled like gasoline. A man whose hands were permanently rough from years of hard work. Camille had always looked down on me for that. She thought real success meant sitting in an air-conditioned office, wearing a suit, running a respectable business, not running a garage, no matter how profitable it was. She never said it outright, but I saw it in her eyes every time I showed up to family dinners straight from the shop. The slight wrinkle of her nose when I walked in. The way she introduced me to her friends with a quick, dismissive, "Oh, my brother-in-law just runs some car shop." Like I was some embarrassment. And now, after everything I had done for her, she had curated me out of her perfect little wedding. I had financed the wedding, and somehow, I wasn't good enough to attend it. I should have seen it coming. It wasn't the first time my in-laws had made me feel like an outsider. The signs had been there for years. Small jabs at family gatherings, dismissive comments about my business, the way my wife's parents beamed with pride when Camille got promoted at her marketing firm but barely acknowledged when I expanded my shop. But no matter how they treated me, I never said no when they needed me. When Camille wanted a lavish wedding but couldn't afford it, I was the one who stepped in. I covered the venue deposit, the catering advance, and even part of her dress. And I never asked for anything in return. I did it because that's what family was supposed to do. You know how expensive weddings are. Camille had whined one night over dinner at my in-laws' house, swirling her wine glass dramatically. "If you want something nice, you have to pay for it." I had replied, half joking, "Easy for you to say." She had huffed. "You don't have student loans. You don't have to keep up a professional appearance. You wear the same boots every day." That was Camille in a nutshell. She equated success with appearances. She never cared that I built my business from the ground up, that I worked 60-hour weeks to make sure my employees had stable jobs, that I earned every damn dollar I had. To her, I was just the guy with oil-stained hands and working-class problems. But I still helped. I still wired the money without hesitation when she and her fiancé came up short. I told myself it was for family, that I wasn't doing it for recognition. Yet here I was, not even worthy of an invitation. The night I read her message, I didn't sleep. I kept going over every moment of the past few months, trying to pinpoint when exactly she decided I wasn't good enough to be seen at her wedding. Was it when I showed up to a family gathering straight from the shop, still in my uniform? Was it when she introduced me to her fancy friends as my sister's husband? He works with cars. Or had she always thought of me this way? At 5 a.m., I sat in the dim light of my kitchen, staring at my phone, and then, as if the universe wanted to mock me one last time, another message came in. Camille, hey, hope you can still help with the final payment for the cake. It's due Friday. XO. I stared at the screen, and then I laughed. I laughed so hard I had to put my coffee down. She really thought I was still going to pay. She thought I would swallow my pride, just like I always did. She had no idea. By the time the sun rose, I had already made my decision. And for the first time in years, I wasn't just going to take it. I was done. I wish I could say Camille's wedding snub was the first time I'd felt like an outsider in my wife's family. But that would be a lie. This wasn't some shocking betrayal that came out of nowhere. It was just the final blow in a long list of slights, dismissals, and quiet humiliations. The signs had always been there. I just chose to ignore them. At first, I thought it was just in my head, that I was reading too much into the way my in-laws talked about me, how their polite smiles always felt a little strained, how their conversations seemed to shift whenever I walked into the room. But the truth was simpler. They never respected me. Not because I was a bad husband, not because I treated my wife poorly or made her life difficult. No, it was something much shallower than that. They didn't respect me because of what I did for a living. I wasn't one of them. Patricia, my mother-in-law, never said it outright, but her face always did. She was the kind of woman who cared deeply about appearances, the kind who measured success by titles, prestige, and the circles you moved in. In her eyes, I was an anomaly. A mechanic, a blue-collar guy in a family full of white-collar professionals. And that, in their world, was a problem. The not-so-subtle hints. The first time I felt it was at one of their dinner parties, a few months after my wife and I got married. Patricia had invited some family friends over. Successful, polished people in expensive clothes who sipped wine and talked about hedge funds and investment portfolios like it was small talk. I wasn't exactly comfortable in those settings, but I did my best. At some point, one of the guests, some corporate guy with an overgelled haircut, asked me what I did for a living. I own an auto repair shop, I said. I wasn't embarrassed by it. Why would I be? I had built my business from nothing. I employed a team of skilled mechanics. I worked on luxury vehicles that most of the people in that room couldn't even afford to repair, let alone own. But instead of a nod or a polite, "That's great," the guy just blinked at me. Then he laughed. "That's different," he said, glancing at Camille. "I guess every family needs a hands-on guy, huh?" The conversation moved on without me, like I had never spoken at all. I saw the way Camille stiffened in her seat, pretending not to notice. The way Patricia took a slow sip of her wine and didn't jump in to defend me. I had shrugged it off at the time, told myself it wasn't a big deal. But that was just the first of many moments like that. Every time we visited my in-laws, it was the same story. The first thing Patricia would do when I walked in was glance down at my hands. The hands of a man who worked for a living. She never said anything, never asked if I washed up before coming. But the way she wrinkled her nose, the way she subtly adjusted her silverware like she was afraid I'd leave grease stains on the tablecloth, it was all the answer I needed. Richard, my father-in-law, was different. He wasn't openly condescending. He was just absent. He didn't look down on me, but he also never stood up for me. He let Patricia and Camille do the talking, while he just nodded along, avoiding conflict like it was an Olympic sport. But the worst part, the part that actually got to me, was how Camille introduced me to people. "This is Marcus. Oh, he runs a car shop." Like I was some guy who changed tires for a living. Like I wasn't the owner of one of the most successful auto repair businesses in the area. Like my job was something she had to gloss over because it wasn't impressive enough. I had heard Camille introduce her friends and colleagues before. "This is Victoria. She's a financial consultant at Wells and Barkley. This is Jeremy. He's a project manager at a tech firm. This is Ethan. He runs a startup in digital marketing." But me? I was just Marcus, who worked with cars. That was how she saw me. That was how they all saw me. And yet, when it came time for money problems, oh, suddenly, I wasn't just a mechanic. I was family. Over the years, I lost count of how many times I stepped in financially for Camille and her parents. They never asked directly, of course. That would have been too obvious. Instead, it was always hints, complaints, subtle little digs disguised as casual conversation. Weddings are so expensive these days, you wouldn't believe how much venues charge now. Ugh, catering is impossible to afford. But what choice do we have? The deposit is due next week. Honestly, I think the dress is more important than the venue. But it's just so hard to budget for everything at once. And every single time, I did what I thought was the right thing. I paid. I covered costs. I sent money. I made sure everything went smoothly, thinking that maybe, just maybe, this time they'd actually appreciate it. But appreciation never came. Recognition never came. Instead, I got reduced to an ATM in their eyes. A wallet that smelled like gasoline. When Camille's wedding came around, I had already wired thousands. I told myself it was for family, that it wasn't about being included. It was about making sure my wife's sister had her dream wedding. But when the invitations went out, when the guest list was finalized, suddenly, Marcus wasn't part of the dream. The night I got Camille's message, telling me I didn't fit the vibe, I thought back to every moment I had ignored. Every dinner where I sat in silence while they bragged about Camille's promotions, but barely acknowledged when I expanded my business. Every introduction where I was just the guy who worked with cars. Every time Patricia glanced at my hands before I picked up my fork. And suddenly, it all clicked. They never wanted me there. They wanted my money. They wanted my help. But they never wanted me. And for the first time in years, I stopped lying to myself. I wasn't family to them. I was just a tool they used when it was convenient. But that was about to change. Because this time, when they came asking for more, they were going to find out what happened when the tool they always used stopped playing along. For good. I don't know what I was expecting when I drove to my in-laws' house that morning. Maybe some kind of explanation. Maybe a weak apology. Maybe even the slightest hint of guilt. But what I got was something much worse. When I arrived, I didn't bother knocking. I wasn't in the mood for pleasantries. I had been part of this family for years, had eaten countless meals at this table, had paid for more things than I could count, and yet, I wasn't worthy of an invitation. I was about to walk in when I heard voices coming from the kitchen, and I stopped. It was Patricia and Camille. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the second I heard my name, I couldn't move. "Well, you know how he is," Patricia said, her tone dripping with quiet disappointment. "I just don't want him embarrassing me," Camille replied. I felt something in my chest tighten. "Embarrassing? It's going to be a sophisticated event," she continued. "I can't have him showing up looking like he just crawled out from under a car." I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. "He's family," Richard mumbled, though his voice lacked conviction. Camille scoffed. "Exactly. And he should understand that this isn't about him. I don't need him there making people uncomfortable. He doesn't belong in that kind of setting." There it was. They didn't just leave me off the list by accident. They didn't forget. They made a deliberate choice to erase me from the event I had funded. And not because there wasn't room, or because the venue had strict rules. No, it was because they thought I wasn't good enough to be seen there. Because I wasn't a polished corporate man in an expensive suit. Because my hands were rough from work. Because I smelled like motor oil instead of designer cologne. And they were afraid I'd make them look bad. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The kitchen fell into immediate silence. Camille went pale the second she saw me, her lips parting slightly as if she had been caught in the middle of a crime. Patricia quickly busied herself at the stove, stirring something that didn't need stirring, pretending like nothing had happened. Richard, well, he did what Richard always did. He avoided eye contact and acted like he wasn't part of the conversation at all. I took a slow, deep breath, locking eyes with Camille. "So that's how you see me?" I asked, my voice calm. She hesitated before straightening her shoulders, her defense walls going up. "Don't take it personally. It's just not your kind of crowd." "Not my kind of crowd?" I echoed, crossing my arms. "Come on, you know what I mean," she huffed. rolling her eyes. Everyone there is from the corporate world. Lawyers, executives, people who actually network. You don't have anything in common with them. There it was again. That same condescending tone. The same dismissal I had been hearing for years. I had built a thriving business from the ground up. I had employees who depended on me. I had more money than half of the people on her so-called exclusive guest list. But none of that mattered to them. Because I worked with my hands. Because I wasn't one of them. Right? I said slowly. Because I don't sit in an office all day. That must mean I'm too dumb to hold a conversation. I never said that, she said quickly, but her face gave her away. Patricia sighed, finally turning around. Sweetheart, it's just a different kind of event. You have to admit, you do come off a little rough sometimes. You're always in those work clothes, and you don't carry yourself the way her guests do. I own a business, I said, keeping my voice steady. I make more money than half of those sophisticated people you're inviting. But because I don't wear a suit every day, I'm not good enough? Camille groaned. It's not about money. It's about image. Look, you helped a lot with the wedding, and I appreciate it. But this is my day. I need everything to be perfect. I just don't think you'd fit in there. She said it so casually, so matter-of-factly, like she was talking about a pair of shoes that clashed with her dress, not a person who had spent thousands of dollars making sure her wedding even happened. I exhaled slowly and nodded. Got it. Patricia's expression softened. Oh, don't be like that, sweetheart. We'll have a nice family dinner after the honeymoon. Just us. That'll be more your style. I smiled, but it wasn't out of kindness. You're right, I said, grabbing my keys. That would be more my style. Because in my world, when someone helps you, you don't turn around and treat them like garbage. And with that, I walked out before they could say another word. By the time I got back to my shop, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Camille. Hey, hope you can still help with the final payment for the cake. It's due Friday. XO. I laughed. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. She really thought I was still going to pay. That I would just swallow my pride, like I always did. She had no idea. For years, I had let them treat me like an outsider. For years, I had paid my way into a family that never truly accepted me. For years, I had been their safety net. But that ended today. They wanted a wedding without me? Fine. That meant they didn't need my money either. I typed out a message, my fingers steady as I hit send. Sorry, I wouldn't want to embarrass you by being associated with your wedding. I'm sure you'll figure it out without me. Good luck. No emojis. No fake kindness. Just a clear, final answer. Not even 5 minutes passed before my phone rang. Camille. I let it go to voicemail. Then Patricia. Then Richard. By the time I closed up shop that night, I had 12 missed calls. And for the first time in years, I ignored every single one of them. Because I finally understood something. They had never cared about me. Just what they could get from me. And if I wasn't welcome in their perfect little world, then neither was my money. By the time I got home that evening, I was done. Not just done with Camille. Not just done with Patricia and Richard. I was done being the guy who always stepped up, always helped, always put family first, only to be treated like an afterthought. I sat on my couch, my phone buzzing nonstop beside me. 12 missed calls. First from Camille, then from Patricia, then from Richard. Even my wife had texted, though she hadn't picked a side yet, at least, not openly. Camille's last text summed it all up. You're seriously overreacting. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, but you already agreed to help. It's really selfish to back out now. Selfish. I had spent thousands of dollars to help make her wedding happen. I had paid for the venue deposit. I had covered the catering advance. I had even helped with her wedding dress, a dress I hadn't even been allowed to see. And yet, now that I wasn't willing to throw more money at a wedding I wasn't invited to, I was the selfish one? I put my phone down before I could send something I'd regret. I needed space. I needed to breathe. But before I could even get up to make myself dinner, there was a knock at the door. I knew who it was before I even opened it. I pulled the door open to find my wife, Lena, standing there, arms crossed. Her expression wasn't angry, not yet, but there was tension in the way she held herself, like she was bracing for a fight. You didn't answer my calls, she said. I leaned against the doorframe. Didn't feel like talking. She sighed. Can I come in? I stepped aside, letting her in. She walked straight to the living room, pausing beside the couch, looking down at my phone. The screen lit up again. Another call from Camille. Lena exhaled sharply. What's going on? I shrugged. You saw the post. Your sister didn't invite me to her wedding. Apparently, I don't fit the vibe. She rubbed her temples. I know. Camille told me. And? Lena hesitated. Look, she handled it poorly, okay? But the guest list was tight, and she had to make tough choices. I stared at her. Right. And one of those tough choices was cutting out the person who paid for the wedding. Lena flinched. That's not what she meant. No? I folded my arms. Then what did she mean, exactly? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like she was happy to take my money but didn't want to be embarrassed by me in front of her fancy friends. Lena sighed. You're twisting this. Camille she wanted everything to be perfect. She didn't think you'd fit in, I finished for her. Lena closed her eyes briefly, like she was trying to find the right words. She's wrong, she admitted finally. I told her she was wrong. But Marcus, this is her wedding. It's her day. And now, you're making it about you by pulling your funding at the last second. I laughed. Oh, so now it's pulling my funding. Not refusing to pay for a wedding I wasn't even invited to. Marcus. No, Lena, I need you to really hear me, I said, my voice steady. Your family has never respected me. I've put up with it because I love you. I've ignored the little comments, the way they look down on me, the way they introduce me like I'm some guy who just changes tires on the street. I've let it go over and over again because I thought, stupidly, that one day they'd actually treat me like family. Lena looked away. She didn't disagree. But this was the last straw, I continued. I paid for that wedding, Lena. I made it possible. And I wasn't even worth a seat at the table. She shook her head. I get it. Okay? I do. But you agreed to help, Marcus. That money was already set aside. Camille planned the wedding around it. If you pull out now, she'll have to figure it out. Just like she figured out how to leave me off the guest list. Lena's jaw tightened. I'm not backing down on this, I said. Your sister made it clear that she doesn't want me there. Fine. That means she doesn't need my money either. Lena sat down on the couch, rubbing her hands over her face. This is going to cause a mess, she muttered. That's not my problem. She exhaled sharply. Marcus, you're better than this. No, I said. I'm just finally done being used. Lena looked up at me, searching my face. And then, after a long moment, she stood up. Okay, she said quietly. I won't try to change your mind. I blinked. I had expected more of a fight. You won't. She shook her head. No, because you're right. They treat you like an outsider. And I should have stood up for you a long time ago. That knocked the wind out of me more than anything else. Lena. I love my sister, but she's wrong, she said, her voice firmer now. And my mom is wrong. And if they can't see that, then that's on them. Not you. For the first time all day, my shoulders relaxed. Thank you, I said quietly. She stepped forward, wrapping her arms around me. I held her tightly, feeling some of the anger start to fade. Not all of it, but enough. I just want you to be okay, she whispered. I will be, I promised. But Camille? She was about to have the worst wedding nightmare of her life. And for once, I wouldn't be the one saving the day. The next morning, my phone was already buzzing before I even got out of bed. I ignored it. I had made my decision, and I wasn't about to let Camille or Patricia guilt me into changing my mind. I knew exactly how this was going to play out. They were going to cry, beg, and then, when that didn't work, they'd get angry. I let them go through all the stages without my involvement. When I finally rolled out of bed and checked my phone, I had 17 missed calls. 8 from Camille, 5 from Patricia. Even Richard had tried a couple of times, though I doubted he had anything meaningful to say. And then there was a single text from Lena. Lena, brace yourself. It's about to get ugly. I smirked. They were already panicking. Good. Then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Camille. Camille, Marcus, I don't know why you're being like this. You know how important this wedding is to me. I get that you're upset, but that doesn't mean you should ruin my day over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. I had to give her credit. Camille was really good at twisting things. I typed out a response. Me? A misunderstanding is when someone forgets to send an invite. You made a choice. So did I. I put my phone down, expecting that to be the end of it. I should have known better. At noon, Lena called. They're losing their minds, she said as soon as I answered. Good, I replied, sipping my coffee. Marcus. What? You know what? I sighed. Lena, your sister made it clear that I don't belong at her wedding. So why should my money belong there? Lena was quiet for a second. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that Camille, well, she never expected you to actually pull out. She assumed you'd still pay, and now they're scrambling. I smirked. That's not my problem. Lena let out a small laugh. Yeah, I told them you'd say that. And Patricia is freaking out because the venue is threatening to cancel the reception unless they settle the remaining balance by the end of the week. The bakery won't release the wedding cake until the payment clears, and Camille hasn't even finished paying the florist. I nearly choked on my coffee. She still owes the florist? Oh, yeah. I leaned back in my chair, shaking my head. So let me get this straight. She planned this entire wedding on the assumption that I'd pay for everything, even though she had no intention of inviting me? Pretty much. And she thinks I'm the problem? Yup. I chuckled. Wow. I almost have to admire the audacity. Lena sighed. Marcus, I'm not asking you to change your mind. But just be prepared. They're desperate now, and they're about to start playing dirty. Let them, I said. I'm done. By mid-afternoon, they had switched tactics. The texts stopped being demanding and turned emotional. Patricia, Marcus, sweetheart, I don't understand why you're being so cruel. Family helps family. We've always been there for you. That one made me laugh out loud. They had been there for me? Funny, I didn't recall them helping when I was working 16-hour days to build my business. I didn't remember them showing up when I had to grind from the ground up, struggling to keep my shop running in the early days. I didn't reply. Then came Richard. Richard, I know you're upset, son, but let's be reasonable. What's a couple of thousand to you? It's already planned. Just help her this one last time. One last time. That phrase made my stomach turn. There would never be a one last time with them. If I gave in now, they would keep taking. And I was done. By evening, I was expecting Camille's next move. She wouldn't beg. That wasn't her style. No, Camille would get angry. And I was right. At 7:42 p.m., she called. I answered. What the hell is wrong with you? She snapped before I could even say hello. Nice to hear from you too, Camille, I said dryly. Cut the crap, Marcus. You know what this is about. You're really going to screw me over like this? Just because you're throwing a tantrum? A tantrum? I repeated. You mean like how you threw a tantrum about me not fitting your vibe? That is not the same thing, she shrieked. You're right, I said calmly. Because what I did was set a boundary. You made it clear I wasn't part of your wedding. So I made it clear my money wasn't either. You're unbelievable, she hissed. You agreed to help. And I changed my mind. Silence. Then she muttered. Do you even care that you're ruining my wedding? I smirked. No, Camille, I said. I care that you thought you could use me and get away with it. And then I hung up. For the first time in years, I felt light. No stress. No guilt. No obligations. I had always assumed that cutting ties, even partially, with my in-laws would be messy, that it would feel like a weight on my chest. But instead, it felt like freedom. Camille thought she could have the perfect wedding while treating me like a walking ATM. Now, she was about to learn a valuable lesson. And the best part? I didn't have to lift a finger. The wedding was already falling apart, and I couldn't wait to watch it burn. The next morning, I woke up to silence. No texts. No missed calls. It was the calm before the storm. I wasn't naive. I knew they weren't done trying. They were just regrouping, trying to figure out a new angle, a new strategy. And by mid-afternoon, they found it. I was at the shop, elbows deep in an engine, when my receptionist poked her head into the garage. Marcus, you've got a visitor. I wiped my hands on a rack. I'm not expecting anyone. She hesitated. It's Patricia. I should have known. I let out a slow breath. Sent her to the office. By the time I stepped inside, Patricia was already seated across from my desk, her purse neatly folded in her lap, her nails tapping against the leather. She wasn't angry, not yet. She was composed, which was more dangerous, because Patricia didn't yell. She guilt. "Marcus," she greeted, offering a tight-lipped smile. "Patricia," I said, sitting down. She exhaled. "I don't want to argue with you." "That's good, because I'm not changing my mind." She flinched, just barely. "Marcus, I know you're upset, and I understand why. Camille handled things poorly, I'll admit that. But you have to understand, she was under a lot of stress." "Right," I said. "So her stress gave her the right to cut me out of the wedding, but still expect me to pay for it? That's not fair," Patricia said, shaking her head. "She didn't think you'd take it this way." "What way?" I leaned forward, like someone who's done being used. Her lips pressed together. "Marcus, this isn't just about you," she finally said. "This is about Camille's wedding. It's her big day, and she's devastated right now. Without your support, things are falling apart. Then maybe she should have thought about that before she decided I didn't fit the vibe." "Oh, for God's sake," Patricia muttered, rubbing her temples. There it was, the first crack in her patience. Good, because I was done playing nice. Patricia straightened her shoulders. "Listen, I'll be honest with you. The venue won't let them in unless the remaining balance is paid by tomorrow morning. The bakery is holding the cake hostage. The florist is about to cancel the arrangements. This wedding is on the verge of collapsing, Marcus. Camille doesn't have the money, and neither do we." I leaned back in my chair, watching her. "And?" Patricia stared at me, waiting, expecting me to step in, to do what I'd always done. But I just sat there, saying nothing, letting her squirm. Her fingers tightened around her purse. "You have the money, Marcus. You could fix this." "I could," I agreed. Silence. A long, stretched-out silence. Patricia's face hardened. "You're really just going to sit there and do nothing?" "I didn't do nothing," I said. "I paid for half this wedding already. I made sure Camille had the wedding of her dreams. She just decided I wasn't good enough to be part of it. So why should my money be?" "Because she's your family," Patricia snapped. I laughed. "No, Patricia," I said. "She made it very clear that I'm not." Patricia's breathing was uneven now, her mask slipping. "I don't understand you," she said, shaking her head. "You're acting like some petty, spiteful child. You're willing to ruin your own sister-in-law's wedding just to prove a point?" "I'm not ruining anything," I said calmly. "Camille did that all on her own. For God's sake, Marcus, this isn't about principles. It's about being practical. The wedding is in 2 days. It's too late to change anything. You're putting Camille in an impossible position." "No, Patricia," I said, standing up. "Camille put herself in this position. She thought she could take my money and discard me like I didn't matter. She assumed I'd just roll over, like I always have. And now, she's learning a valuable lesson." Patricia's face turned red. "You'll regret this," she hissed. I smiled. "Maybe, but not today." She stood up, smoothing out her blouse. "Fine," she said, "but don't expect us to come running back to you after this. Camille won't forget this, and neither will I." I shrugged. "That's fine. I prefer my bank account over your approval anyway." Patricia's eyes burned with fury, but she said nothing else. She grabbed her purse, turned on her heel, and stormed out. I didn't expect to hear from Camille again. Not after that. But that night, at 11:37 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from her. "Camille, if I invite you now, will you still help?" I stared at it for a long moment. Then I typed out my response. "Me, enjoy your wedding, Camille. You'll have to figure it out without me." I blocked her number before she could reply. And for the first time in years, I went to sleep with a smile on my face. Because this time, I had one. The morning of Camille's wedding, I woke up to the sound of silence. No calls, no texts, just peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't stressed about fixing someone else's problem. I didn't have to chase after last-minute payments. I wasn't expected to step in at the 11th hour to save the day. I had removed myself from the equation. And, apparently, they were feeling it. Because at 11:27 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Lena's cousin, Sarah. Sarah, bro, you're not gonna believe this. The venue just kicked them out. I sat up, rereading the message. I didn't need to ask why. I already knew. Camille had assumed, banked on, the fact that someone, anyone, would step in at the last second. She had spent months planning an extravagant, over-the-top wedding on the assumption that her blue-collar brother-in-law would just keep throwing money at the problem. But when that didn't happen, when she showed up that morning, expecting the venue to smile and let everything slide, she learned the hard way that bills don't pay themselves. I chuckled to myself as I got out of bed. Camille had spent all this time trying to curate the perfect wedding, making sure everything was just right, that the right people were in attendance, that the wrong ones, like me, were cut out. And now, her perfect wedding was unraveling before her very eyes. I didn't feel guilty, not even a little bit. I had warned them. I had given them every opportunity to make this right. Instead, they had assumed I'd cave. But I didn't. And now, they were paying the price. By 12:03 p.m., my phone lit up again. This time, it was Lena. I answered, trying not to sound too amused. How bad is it? I asked. Marcus, she sighed. It's a complete disaster. I smirked. Oh, don't be like that. Like what? Like you're enjoying this. I didn't say anything. Because, honestly, I was. Lena, I said, I told them this would happen. I told them, months ago, that they were biting off more than they could chew. But Camille wanted a luxury wedding on a budget, and thought she could just write my name on the check without inviting me. I know. And now, she's learning a lesson. Lena sighed again. Marcus, it's bad. How bad? The venue literally locked the doors while guests were arriving. The wedding planner was running around in a panic. The cake never got delivered. The florist canceled the arrangements. Camille was standing outside in her dress, screaming at the event manager. I raised an eyebrow. Screaming? Full meltdown, Lena confirmed. I shook my head. Camille always did have a flair for the dramatic. Where's the wedding now? I asked. Richard's backyard. They had to move everything last minute. No decorations, no expensive catering, just some folding chairs and a few trays of store-bought food. I nearly laughed. Camille had spent months boasting about how exclusive, elegant, and curated her wedding would be. Now, she was standing in plastic heels on uneven grass, watching her dream day crumble into mediocrity. The irony was almost poetic. At 1:15 p.m., my phone rang again. Camille. I picked up this time. What? I answered, voice flat. There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then, she spoke. Are you happy now? She demanded, her voice shaking. I leaned back in my chair, amused. About what? You know exactly what, she snapped. The wedding is ruined. Oh, I said casually. Didn't have enough money? She let out a sharp breath, barely holding back her frustration. You knew we didn't have enough, she hissed. You were supposed to help. I chuckled. No, Camille, I said. You assumed I would. Silence. The kind that burns. Then, finally, her voice wavered. I don't understand, she whispered. Why couldn't you just help? And there it was. The part that really got her. She had never imagined a world where I didn't step in. After everything we've been through, she continued. After everything I've done? That made me laugh. Everything you've done? I repeated. Like what, Camille? Like taking my money? Like using me when it was convenient? Like treating me like an ATM while making it clear I wasn't good enough to be part of your life? I didn't mean it like that, she protested. You never do, I said coldly. That's the problem. Silence again. Then, her voice softened. So this is it, she murmured. You're really just walking away? I let out a slow breath. I already did, I said. You just didn't notice until now. And then I hung up. The wedding went on. Just not the way Camille had planned. No extravagant decorations. No high-end catering. No five-star venue. Just a bare-bones backyard wedding thrown together at the last second. And from what I heard, Camille spent the entire night trying not to cry. She didn't enjoy a second of it. She was too humiliated, too focused on what wasn't there. The luxury, the status, the validation from people she so desperately wanted to impress. I didn't reach out. I didn't apologize. I didn't check in. I let her sit in the mess she created. Because, for the first time in years, I wasn't the one cleaning it up. And I never would be again. For weeks after the wedding, I waited for the fallout to settle. The first few days were a mess, a constant barrage of texts, missed calls, and guilt tripping from my in-laws. They tried everything. First, they played the victim, acting like I had committed some unforgivable betrayal. Then, when that didn't work, they switched to anger. When I ignored those, they went silent. And that was when I knew they finally understood. I wasn't coming back from this. I wasn't their ATM anymore. I wasn't the guy who would quietly fix things while they continued to treat me like an afterthought. I was done. I never got an apology from Camille. Not a real one, anyway. She sent one text a few days after the wedding. "Camille, I don't want things to be like this between us." No, I'm sorry. No acknowledgement of what she had done. Just a vague attempt to smooth things over, as if this was just a simple misunderstanding. I didn't bother responding. She didn't deserve closure. Not after everything. My in-laws had always treated me like a second-class member of the family. Now, they treated me carefully. Like they had finally realized I wasn't obligated to put up with their treatment. Patricia, who had spent years looking down on me, suddenly became polite. Not warm, not kind, but cautious. As if she knew one wrong word could push me into cutting ties completely. Richard? He remained as neutral as ever. He never stood up for me, but at least he wasn't actively against me. Lena was the only one who really understood what this meant. "You changed the dynamic," she told me one night. "They're afraid of losing access to you completely." And she was right. They weren't sorry. They were just afraid. Afraid of what would happen if I stopped existing in their world entirely. Afraid of losing the financial safety net they had always counted on. But I didn't care. I didn't care about their discomfort. Because for the first time in years, I had put myself first. It took months for the tension to settle. At first, there were awkward family gatherings where everyone pretended nothing had happened. Camille avoided me. Patricia tried to act like things were normal. Richard stayed quiet, as always. But something had changed. They didn't ask me for anything anymore. No sudden financial emergencies. No hints about covering expenses. No expectation that I would step in and fix their problems. And that was my win. Camille never asked for money again. She didn't have to. She knew the answer would be no. Now, I live my life on my own terms. I still run my shop. Still work hard. Still get my hands dirty every day. But the difference? Every dollar I earn is mine. Not theirs. Not a family fund for people who never respected me. Just mine. And for the first time in years, I feel free. Because I finally understand. Respect isn't given. It's taken. And I took mine back.